Welcome, brave wanderers, to the shadowed heart of the Pacific Northwest. Tonight, we leave behind the hum of city life and step into the dense, misty forests of Washington state. Here, among towering evergreens and fog-cloaked valleys, lie villages long abandoned, where the echoes of the past never truly fade. These are not just ghost towns. They are forest villages, swallowed by nature, haunted by miners, loggers, and families who once called them home. And sometimes, they say, those who enter never return. Tonight, I will guide you through 25 of Washington's most haunted forest villages. Prepare to hear the whispers of the long-dead footsteps where no one walks, and shadows that move when the light cannot reach. Keep your senses sharp. The forest is listening. Perched high in the rugged North Cascades, the ghost town of Monte Cristo sits like a relic frozen in time. Once a thriving mining village in the 1890s, it buzzed with the energy of prospectors, families, and laborers chasing the promise of gold and silver. The town had stores, saloons, a hotel, and cabins that housed the miners and their families. But the riches were fleeting. Avalanches, floods, and economic downturns drove the inhabitants away, leaving behind only decaying structures and rusted remnants of a once bustling community. Today, Monte Cristo is silent, or so it seems, yet those who wander among its ruins speak of experiences that suggest the town's spirit has refused to fade. Phantom pickaxes strike against invisible rock, laughter rings through the fog, and shadowy figures move among the cabins, replaying echoes of a life that vanished over a century ago. Visitors stepping onto the abandoned paths of Monte Cristo are immediately struck by the contrast between the surrounding wilderness and the skeletal remains of human industry. The air is crisp and carries the scent of pine and damp earth, but there is a persistent undertone of something metallic, a lingering trace of the mines that once operated here. Rusted machinery sits half-buried in moss and soil, wheels and gears frozen mid-motion. Yet occasionally, some swear they hear the metallic clanging of pickaxes striking stone, distant yet startlingly clear. The sound seems to come from deep within the earth, as if the mountain itself remembers the toil of the miners. The cabins are another source of eerie fascination. Many are collapsed or missing walls, their frames warped and weathered by decades of wind, snow, and rain. Walking among them, visitors often report shadows that move across the broken floors, fleeting shapes glimpsed at the corner of vision. Sometimes, a shadow appears to pause as if observing, then vanishes when directly approached. Ghostly laughter has been heard spilling from the ruins, sometimes high-pitched and fleeting, like children playing, sometimes deep and hollow, echoing as though from the bar of a long-abandoned saloon. The sounds carry unnaturally far through the narrow paths and ravines, giving the impression that the town is alive once more, if only for a fleeting moment. The mine entrances are particularly charged with residual energy. Dark mouths of tunnels gape like silent teeth, leading into the mountainside where miners once dug for precious metals. Many visitors report hearing the rhythmic tapping of pickaxes deep inside, even though the tunnels are impassable and empty. Occasionally, a faint glow can be seen within the darkness, resembling lantern light carried by figures just out of reach. Some have described glimpsing silhouettes moving through the tunnels, appearing and disappearing with unnatural fluidity, never approaching, never retreating, as if trapped in a perpetual labor that time itself cannot release. The environment enhances the unsettling atmosphere. Mist rolls down the mountains in the early evening, curling around the ruined cabins and abandoned equipment. Shadows grow long and distorted in the fog, making it impossible to distinguish between a crumbling post and a human figure. Wind whistles through broken windows and open doorways, carrying whispers that sound like fragmented words, laughter, or the soft murmur of conversation from another time. The interplay of sound, shadow, and environment creates a sense of immersion. The town does not feel abandoned, but suspended, alive in its own spectral dimension. Some visitors experience more physical sensations than mere sight and sound. A sudden chill may sweep across the narrow valley, brushing against the skin like an unseen hand. Steps on uneven ground sometimes feel resisted, as if the earth beneath carries the weight of centuries of human labor. The air seems to vibrate with expectation, charged by the memory of ambition, toil, and the fleeting joys of a community long gone. Even those who arrive with skepticism often leave with the unsettling awareness that they have walked among lingering presences and entities tied to the life, work, and tragedy of Monte Cristo's brief but intense existence. Despite its eerie reputation, the town has a haunting beauty. The skeletal cabins, rusted machinery, and abandoned rail tracks form a tapestry of history frozen in decay. The North Cascades rise sharply around the settlement, framing the ruins in a rugged, untamed landscape. Shadows flit between tree trunks and broken structures, mingling with the fog, creating a living panorama of memory and loss. It is a place where the natural and the supernatural converge, where the echoes of human ambition are preserved in stone, wood, and earth, and where visitors are constantly reminded of the impermanence of human endeavor. Monte Cristo is more than a ghost town. It is a repository of memory. Phantom pickaxes strike against invisible rock, laughter drifts across empty cabins, and shadowy figures roam the ruins as if carrying forward the routines of a long-vanished population. The town's decay does not erase its presence. Rather, it preserves it in a spectral echo that can be felt, heard, and sometimes glimpsed. Those who wander among the ruins may feel watched by unseen eyes, hear the distant rhythm of labor, or sense figures moving just out of reach, forever replaying the life that once thrived in this remote corner of the North Cascades. Visitors leave Monte Cristo with a profound impression. A town both alive and dead, where shadow, sound, and memory linger. The ruins may crumble, and the mountains may reclaim the earth, but the echoes of laughter, the strike of pickaxes, and the ghostly silhouettes of miners will continue to roam the valley, ensuring that Monte Cristo's story is never truly forgotten. The abandoned coal mining town of Melmont sits quietly near the slopes of Mount Rainier, a forgotten relic of industry and human ambition. Founded in the late 19th century, it thrived briefly as miners extracted coal from the surrounding hills, powering trains and fueling the growth of nearby towns. Wooden cabins, a general store, a small schoolhouse, and rows of modest homes gave structure to the lives of those who labored here. But in 1905, a catastrophic explosion in the mines claimed dozens of lives and left the town in ruin. Residents fled in the aftermath, leaving behind their homes, belongings, and dreams. Today, only weathered cabins and rusted remnants remain. But hikers and explorers report strange phenomena that suggest the echoes of tragedy linger still. Visitors to Melmont often speak of a pervasive chill that descends unexpectedly, even in summer. The air among the ruins feels heavier, dense with history and unspoken sorrow. As hikers approach the town, the sound of the wind shifts. It carries whispers that seem more than just a natural sigh of the trees. Some claim to hear voices calling names, fragments of sentences, or soft laughter, fleeting and distant. Others describe a sudden drop in temperature, a cold spot that seems to follow them down the crumbling streets, brushing against the skin like an unseen hand. The sensation is not painful but unsettling, a physical reminder that the town holds memory and presence. One of the most reported sights in Melmont is the ghost of a young boy. He is often described as standing near the remnants of the schoolhouse or wandering the outskirts of the cabins. His appearance is subtler, fleeting silhouette, sometimes glimpsed in the corner of the eye, other times fully formed for a brief moment. The boy is said to look mournful, his gaze distant, as though searching for family or friends lost in the explosion. Some hikers report he moves silently, vanishing when approached, leaving only the sense of sorrow and longing behind. Those who have seen him often feel a compulsion to linger, to acknowledge his presence, yet he remains untouchable, a ghost tethered to the pain of that fateful day. The ruins themselves amplify the eerie atmosphere. Roofless cabins, weathered by decades of wind and rain, cast long shadows across the overgrown streets. Rusted mining equipment, hoists, carts, and rail stands as silent testimony to the industry that once sustained the town. Footsteps echo unnaturally among these structures, even when no one else is present. Hikers sometimes report hearing the rhythmic tapping of tools, the shuffle of boots along wooden floors, or the clatter of equipment being moved, sounds that echo the lives of miners long gone. These auditory hallucinations are fleeting but unmistakable, creating the impression that the town is replaying fragments of daily life in an endless loop. Whispers in the wind are another consistent feature. They seem to come from nowhere and everywhere, weaving through broken windows, rusted machinery, and tree-lined paths. Some hikers describe hearing coherent words, often related to work, fear, or family, while others perceive only murmurs that fade before they can be understood. The effect is disorienting, making the town feel simultaneously empty and crowded with unseen presences. The wind becomes a carrier of memory, a conduit through which the lives and deaths of Melmont's residents continue to echo. Cold spots in the ruins are unpredictable but chillingly tangible. A hiker may step into sunlight, only to feel the temperature drop suddenly when passing a cabin or the schoolhouse. These cold patches often coincide with reported sightings of the boy or the strongest whispers, suggesting an invisible connection between residual energy and environmental phenomena. The effect can be visceral, hair standing on end, a sudden shiver, or the sensation of being watched. Even the most skeptical visitors find themselves unnerved by the sudden shift in air. A reminder that Melmont's history is not fully buried beneath its ruins. The geography of Melmont contributes to its haunting. Nestled in a valley below Mount Rainier, the surrounding forest encroaches upon the town, reclaiming streets and buildings with moss, trees, and undergrowth. Mist often rises from the slopes, swirling through the ruins and obscuring the crumbling structures. Shadows twist and lengthen across the overgrown streets, making it difficult to distinguish natural movement from spectral presence. In this interplay of fog, forest, and ruin, the town seems to come alive, playing host to the memories of those who once inhabited it. Despite the tragic history, the ruins of Melmont possess a stark beauty. The remnants of cabins and mining equipment tell a story of industry, ambition, and loss. The surrounding wilderness, with Mount Rainier looming in the distance, frames the town in both majesty and melancholy. But for those who linger, beauty is entwined with unease. Shadows move where they should not, whispers float on the wind, and the coldness of the ruins is never merely physical. It is a presence, a reminder of lives cut short and histories left unfinished. Melmont is more than a ghost town. It is a repository of memory and emotion. Footsteps echo along broken streets, sometimes aligning with one's own, sometimes moving independently, as if the town itself remembers every step taken over a century ago. Hikers leave with a lingering awareness that Melmont is never truly empty, that its tragedies continue to pulse through the cabins, the forest, and the wind, preserving the echoes of life, loss, and grief that time cannot erase. Visitors who traverse Melmont experience both history and haunt a place. Where memory is alive, shadows linger, and the past continues. Its quiet vigil etched into every stone, every tree, and every gust of wind that sweeps through the abandoned streets. The town's tragedy is eternal, its whispers unending, and its ghostly presences a solemn reminder that some histories refuse to die. Nestled deep within the dense evergreens of Stampede Pass, the logging town of Leicester sits in quiet decay, a ghostly remnant of industry and human ambition. Once a thriving hub for loggers and railroad workers, Leicester's foundations and abandoned tracks now serve as silent witnesses to lives long gone. Wooden structures have rotted away, leaving only crumbling chimneys, moss-covered beams, and the skeletal outlines of cabins and sheds. Yet despite its apparent emptiness, the town is far from lifeless. Locals speak in hushed tones of echoes that linger of phantom trains rattling along tracks that have long since fallen into disrepair, and of footsteps that follow hikers and explorers through the thick forest as though Leicester itself remembers the people who once called it home. Approaching Leicester, visitors are struck first by the stillness. The forest encroaches rapidly, reclaiming the town with its tangle of ferns, fallen logs, and towering pines. The tracks, once vital arteries for lumber and supplies, now twist through the undergrowth, rusty rails catching the faintest glint of sunlight. The foundations of buildings, half buried in moss and earth, hint at the structures that once bustled with work, laughter, and the mundane rhythms of daily life. The sense of isolation is immediate, heightened by the knowledge that, decades ago, this place was filled with people who lived and labored in intimate connection with the surrounding wilderness. As night falls, Leicester transforms. The forest, already dense and shadowed, becomes a labyrinth of darkness. Locals report hearing the distant whistle of trains that never arrive, the screech of wheels against rails long abandoned. The sound is unnervingly real, a low rumble in the distance, punctuated by the clatter of phantom wheels, moving at a speed and rhythm impossible to mistake for natural forest noise. Those who hear it describe a strange mixture of awe and dread, as if the ghostly trains carry not only the weight of timber and industry, but also the memories of the men and women who worked here, now invisible yet preserved in sound. Footsteps accompany the spectral trains, sometimes echoing alongside the tracks, sometimes appearing in the dense forest, following paths that no longer exist. Hikers report sudden, soft, crunching sounds on moss and twigs, the distinct rhythm of someone walking behind them, only to turn and find no one there. The sounds move independently, circling around the living in patterns that mimic curiosity or intent. It is as if the town itself is aware of intruders, acknowledging their presence while replaying fragments of its past life, preserving the echoes of those who once walked these trails. Structures within Leicester amplify the haunting. Foundations hollowed out by decay create natural echoes, where footsteps reverberate unnaturally, bouncing off unseen walls. Collapsed sheds and storage buildings distort sound further, making it difficult to pinpoint the source of movement. Even the wind contributes to the sense of presence, rustling through timber, whistling along the tracks, and carrying with it faint murmurs. These murmurs are rarely coherent, but convey the unmistakable impression of human voices, as if snippets of conversation, laughter, or warning persist in the air, woven into the very fibers of the abandoned town. The atmosphere is intensified by sudden cold spots that appear without warning. A hiker may be surrounded by warm summer air one moment and then feel a sharp, biting chill the next, as if invisible hands are brushing against their arms. The sensation is often accompanied by the most vivid auditory phenomena: a whistle of a train, the rhythmic strike of phantom boots, or the faint laughter of unseen children or loggers at work. Skeptics may dismiss these experiences as tricks of perception, yet the consistency of reports and the physical reactions they provoke suggest that Leicester as history is more than just memory. It is a lingering, active presence. The geography of Stampede Pass contributes to the eerie resonance. The narrow valleys, steep slopes, and dense forests create a natural amphitheater for sound, amplifying echoes and lending weight to the whispers of the past. Mist frequently rises from the mountains, curling around fallen logs and rusted rails, distorting shapes and shadows, making the unseen feel immediately near. The interplay of light and shadow, sound and silence, creates an environment in which the past and present converge, a place where history manifests itself in sensation as much as sight. Despite the unsettling phenomena, there is a haunting beauty to Leicester. The skeletal remains of cabins and timber yards are framed by majestic evergreens and the distant slopes of Mount Rainier. Shadows and mist create a shifting tableau of ruin and memory, a frozen reflection of life that once thrived in the forest. The ghostly trains, footsteps, and whispers are not malevolent. Rather, they are expressions of presence, echoes of community, labor, and the relentless passage of time. Leicester is more than an abandoned town. It is a living memory, a place where the forest remembers the people who built, worked, and lived within its bounds. Phantom trains rumble along overgrown tracks, footsteps trace unseen paths through moss and roots, and whispers swirl on the wind like fragments of conversations long forgotten. The ghostly echoes of lives once lived remain, preserved in sound, shadow, and cold, ensuring that Leicester, though abandoned, is never truly empty. Visitors leave with the sense that the town watches, listens, and remembers. a spectral monument to human endeavor and loss in the heart of the North Cascades. Nestled along the winding Green River, the sawmill town of Negrum lies hidden beneath a blanket of forest, long abandoned and slowly reclaimed by nature. Once a bustling hub of timber and industry, Negrum thrived in the early 20th century. Its sawmills, humming with the rhythm of axes, saws, and the flow of logs down the river, cabins lined narrow streets, workers' families filled the small homes, and the smell of freshly cut timber hung in the air. But decades of decline, economic shifts, and the relentless encroachment of the forest led to the town's abandonment. Today, the ruins have vanished almost entirely beneath moss, vines, and towering evergreens, leaving only the faintest traces of foundations and rusted machinery. Yet, despite the absence of human life, visitors report a lingering presence, as if Negrum itself refuses to be forgotten. Hikers entering the area often describe a peculiar atmosphere as they approach what once was the heart of the town. The air is thick with mist that curls along the riverbank, winding through stumps and fallen logs. The scent of damp earth pine and decaying timber dominates, and there is a subtle, almost imperceptible hum in the environmental resonance that seems to carry the memory of the sawmills, the steady chopping of axes, and the shuffle of boots through underbrush. It is in this quiet, suspended moment that the forest seems alive with the echoes of the past, and some claim that the spectral inhabitants of Negrum are never far. The most common sightings involve figures described as loggers, wandering the dense timber with lanterns flickering through the fog. These apparitions are rarely seen in full. Instead, they appear as tall silhouettes moving deliberately among the trees. The light from their lanterns dances through the mist, sometimes appearing close enough to illuminate the mossy forest floor, only to vanish when approached. Hikers report an unsettling sensation of being watched, of eyes tracing their movements through the dense foliage. The loggers seem to move along paths invisible to the living, retracing routes long overgrown and performing labor that no longer has any purpose. Sounds are just as haunting as the apparitions. The rhythmic chopping of axes sometimes resonates through the trees, accompanied by the creak and hum of old machinery that has long since rusted into silence. Some claim to hear the shuffle of boots across leaf-littered ground, footsteps echoing unnaturally as if traveling on invisible planks or through forgotten streets. Occasionally, distant voices are heard, fragments of conversation, laughter, or calls between workers that rise and fall with the wind. These sounds are ephemeral, often disappearing when one turns to locate them, leaving behind only the tangible silence of the forest and a lingering sense of unease. The fog that envelopes Negrum is a conduit for these spectral phenomena. Thick and curling, it obscures the ruins and distorts distance and shape. Shadows twist among the trees and fallen beams, taking forms that seem both human and otherworldly. The interplay of light from the spectral lanterns with the mist produces fleeting images that vanish almost as quickly as they appear. Hikers sometimes swear they see a figure pause to look directly at them before melting into the fog, leaving only a cold, damp breeze that brushes against the skin, like the echo of a forgotten handshake or the lingering warmth of a body long gone. Physical sensations often accompany the sights and sounds. Visitors report sudden chills that descend without warning, cold patches that cling to the body, or the subtle brush of an invisible hand along an arm. These sensations are fleeting but vivid, enhancing the feeling that Negrum's history is alive and capable of interacting with the living. Even those with no belief in the supernatural find themselves unnerved, as though the forest itself is steeped in memory, replaying moments from the town's past with stubborn persistence. Despite the haunting, Negrum holds a stark, melancholic beauty. The forest has reclaimed its space completely. Moss drapes over rusted rails and fallen timber. Ferns carpet the forest floor, and sunlight pierces the canopy in fractured beams. The remnants of the town's structures, barely discernible beneath decades of growth, hint at the lives that once flourished here. In this juxtaposition of decay and renewal, the spectral loggers appear almost natural, as if they are extensions of the forest itself, guardians of memory, keepers of history. and echoes of labor that can never truly end. The Green River continues to flow past the ruins, indifferent to the passage of time. Reflecting the silhouettes of trees and mist above, it carries the whispers of Negrum downstream, a gentle reminder that the town's spirit endures in sound, shadow, and memory. Those who linger often describe a mixture of awe and melancholy, sensing the weight of a community that lived, worked, and disappeared, leaving traces not in stone or wood, but in lingering energy and memory. Negrum is more than an abandoned sawmill town. It is a place where past and present coexist in subtle, haunting ways. Lanterns flicker among the fog, shadows drift through dense timber, and the sounds of work, long ended, echo across the forest floor. The spectral loggers continue their silent labor, retracing the steps of lives intertwined with the land, the river, and the relentless growth of the forest. Visitors leave with the indelible impression that the town is alive in memory and spirit, a reminder that even when human life fades, history and emotion persist, lingering in shadow, mist, and the whispering trees of Negrum. Deep in the forests of Ferry County, the abandoned iron mining settlement of Belcher Camp stands as a silent testament to ambition, labor, and the unforgiving forces of time. Once a bustling enclave where miners carved wealth from the earth, the town thrived in the early 20th century. Its population drawn by the promise of iron-rich veins beneath the rugged hills, cabins lined narrow dirt streets, supply sheds held the tools of the trade, and the distant clang of hammers against rock and iron filled the air. But the mines eventually ran dry, and the settlement fell into disrepair. Today, Belcher Camp is nothing more than scattered foundations, rusted machinery, and the dense forest slowly reclaiming what was once built by human hands. Yet, despite its apparent abandonment, those who venture here tell stories of ghostly miners, spectral lanterns, and the unmistakable echo of tools clanging in the quiet of the night. Arriving at Belcher Camp, visitors are struck by the stillness. The forest presses in from all sides, tall evergreens forming a thick canopy that filters the sunlight into mottled patches on the forest floor. Foundations of cabins and workhouses poke through the moss and undergrowth, their wooden beams rotting, their roofs long gone. Rusted mining carts and carts of iron ore, frozen mid-tilt, hint at the industry that once drove the town's existence. There is a weight to the air here, a sense that the forest has absorbed both the labor and the loss of the miners, preserving it in an almost tangible energy that can be felt by those who tread the narrow paths between ruins. At night, the haunting begins in earnest. Hikers and adventurers frequently report the sound of tools striking iron or stone, the clanging and scraping distinct and deliberate. The echoes travel through the trees, bouncing from rock face to fallen timber, and the source is never apparent. The sound is too precise to be the wind and too rhythmic to be purely imagined. Some claim to have glimpsed figures in the distance, miners bent over their work, lanterns flickering as they move through the mist and shadow. These apparitions vanish when approached, leaving only the sound of tools fading into the darkness and the lingering sensation of another presence just out of reach. The spectral miners are described as both tangible and ethereal. They appear clad in early 20th century work clothes, their faces obscured by shadows or the haze of memory. Lanterns they carry cast light that seems too warm to be natural, flickering in patterns that suggest deliberate motion, like hands guiding tools along hidden veins of ore. Visitors often report feeling observed, as though unseen eyes follow them along the overgrown paths, their gaze heavy, but not necessarily hostile. The ghosts seem bound to the land and the labor that once sustained the settlement. Caught in an endless cycle of work they cannot abandon, the environment of Belcher Camp intensifies the experience. Mist frequently drifts through the trees, curling around foundations, rusted equipment, and fallen logs. Shadows lengthen and twist in the fog, creating fleeting shapes that vanish as quickly as they appear. Wind whistles through the treetops and broken structures, carrying faint murmurs, the soft shuffle of boots on uneven ground, and the rhythmic tapping of tools. Even in daylight, hikers report a subtle hum, a vibration in the air that is felt more than heard. as though the memory of labor resonates through the very soil and timber of the settlement. Cold spots add a physical element to the haunting. A sudden chill may sweep over a visitor's arm or shoulders, coinciding with the appearance of a shadowy figure or the sound of a distant hammer strike. The sensation is intense and sudden, often accompanied by goosebumps or the shiver of being watched. These moments create a sense of intimacy with the past, as if the energy of the miners once living, sweating, and straining in the depths of the earth remains lodged in the forest, brushing against anyone who dares to enter. Despite the spectral activity, there is a stark beauty to Belcher Camp. The ruins of the town, framed by dense evergreen forests and misty hills, form a tableau of decay and resilience. Rusted iron carts and abandoned tools tell a story of industry and human ambition, while the forest grows over and around them, blending the work of man with the quiet reclamation of nature. Ghostly figures, flickering lanterns, and echoing sounds of labor become part of this tapestry, preserving a memory of life, effort, and community that time cannot erase. Belcher Camp is more than an abandoned mining settlement. It is a living memory etched into the landscape. The ghostly miners continue to labor in spectral form, their lanterns swinging among the fog, their tools striking against unseen or footsteps echo along overgrown paths. Shadows flit between foundations, and the rhythmic clanging of work reverberates through the forest long after the living have departed. Visitors leave with the impression that the town is never truly empty, that history, labor, and loss persist in subtle, haunting ways, bound to the earth, the trees, and the lingering energy of Belcher Camp itself. Here, in the heart of Ferry County, the settlement remains both present and absent, a ghostly echo of ambition and toil. The spectral miners walk, work, and watch, preserving the life of a town long gone. For those who wander its forested paths at dusk or under the cover of night, Belcher Camp is not simply a ruin. It is a place where history lives, and where the spirits of those who labored in iron continue their eternal vigil. Tucked away in the thick forests of Okanogan County, the ghost town of Ruby lies, mostly hidden from sight, its ruins slowly swallowed by trees and undergrowth. Once a thriving silver boomtown in the late 19th century, Ruby was alive with the clatter of pickaxes, the hum of stamp mills, and the hopeful chatter of miners and their families. Wooden buildings lined narrow streets, saloons rang with laughter and song, and the occasional carriage rumbled along dust-covered paths. But as the silver veins ran dry and economic fortune shifted, the town was abandoned, leaving behind only decaying structures and memories etched into the surrounding forest. Today, Ruby is quiet, almost too quiet, yet locals speak of sights and sounds that suggest the spirit of the town refuses to rest. Shimmering silver apparitions glide among the trees, and faint echoes of mining work still drift through the dense foliage, as if the past has refused to fade entirely. Arriving at Ruby, visitors first notice the forest's dominance. Ancient pines and firs form a dense canopy, sunlight filtering in scattered beams that illuminate moss-covered foundations and remnants of timbered buildings. Broken boards, rusted tools, and fragments of mining equipment peek through undergrowth, hinting at the town's once bustling activity. Even in daylight, there is a palpable sense of presence, as if the town's energy lingers, a residue of the lives that flourished here and the work that defined them. The forest is both beautiful and oppressive, an emerald cathedral that preserves Ruby's history while quietly hiding it from the modern world. At night, Ruby's haunting becomes unmistakable. Locals tell of ghostly figures shimmering with an otherworldly silver glow, gliding along the slopes and paths where miners once toiled. These apparitions are often fleeting, just a shimmer at the edge of the forest, or a reflection that seems to move independently of natural light, but they carry a strange sense of intent. Some appear to carry tools, swinging pickaxes, or examining unseen veins of silver, their movements precise and deliberate, as if replaying the labor that once sustained the town. Those who observe them report a mixture of awe and unease. The figures at once mesmerizing and chilling, embodying the lingering spirit of human ambition, frozen in spectral form. The sounds of Ruby add another layer to its eerie presence. Hikers and explorers frequently hear faint echoes of mining activity, the rhythmic strike of hammers against rock, the scrape of carts over rails, or the muffled rumble of stamp mills long silent. These noises are never continuous and rarely come from a single direction, creating a sense of disorientation. At times, the sounds seem to rise from beneath the forest floor, as though the mines themselves are speaking, replaying fragments of past labor. The effect is subtle but powerful, stirring a vivid sense of the town's history, while keeping visitors constantly aware of unseen presences. Shadows in Ruby are also deceptive and unsettling. Moonlight glances off broken windows and rusted surfaces, creating shapes that move with the wind and mist. Many report glimpsing figures standing or moving along the forest edges, only to vanish when approached. The apparitions are often tied to old building sites or mine entrances, lingering where their lives and work were centered. Fog rolling through the trees adds to the effect, twisting forms and reflecting light in unnatural ways, making it impossible to distinguish between natural phenomena and something more spectral. Physical sensations accompany these sights and sounds. Sudden chills sweep across the forest floor, brushing against arms and necks, often coinciding with the appearance of a silver apparition or the faint strike of a pickaxe. Visitors sometimes feel watched, their skin prickling with the sense that unseen eyes are observing every movement. Even skeptics are caught off guard, the combination of visual, auditory, and tactile stimuli creating an immersive, almost tangible connection to the town's long-gone inhabitants. Despite its haunting qualities, Ruby possesses a stark and melancholic beauty. The overgrown ruins, filtered sunlight, and mist-shrouded forests create a scene both serene and unsettling. Rusted equipment and crumbling buildings hint at human endeavor, while the spectral apparitions, flickering lanterns, and faint echoes of labor remind visitors that memory and history remain alive in subtle, persistent ways. The town feels simultaneously abandoned and inhabited, a space where the boundary between past and present blurs. Ruby is more than an empty ghost town. It is a place where history and spirit intertwine, and carts drift through the forest, and the sense of presence lingers in shadows, fog, and rusted remnants of human habitation. Visitors leave with the impression that Ruby is never truly empty, that the lives, labor, and hopes of those who once called it home continue to exist in spectral form, bound to the land, the forest, and the silver veins that once made the town flourish. For those who wander Ruby's forested ruins at dusk or under a silvered moon, the town is not merely a memory. It is a living echo. The spectral miners move silently among foundations and trees, tools raised in endless labor, their shimmering forms a reminder that the history of human endeavor cannot simply vanish. The forest may reclaim buildings and overtake streets, but the spirit of Ruby endures, carried in light, sound, and shadow, a testament to the lives and dreams of a silver boomtown that time cannot erase. The abandoned railway town of Govan, east of Cooley City, sits quietly amid fields and groves, a forgotten marker of a bygone era. Once a modest hub for trains and travelers, Govan thrived with the movement of goods and people, its small school filled with the chatter of children, and its post office bustling with letters and parcels connecting the town to the wider world. Wooden homes and modest businesses lined the streets, creating a tight-knit community where life moved at the rhythm of the trains. But as railway routes shifted and the population dwindled, Govan was slowly abandoned, leaving behind crumbling structures, empty streets, and a silence that stretches across the landscape. Yet those who venture here speak of more than decay. They describe an active presence, echoes of lives once lived, and the restless spirits that seem to linger in the shadows of the old buildings. Arriving at Govan, the first impression is of stillness. The wind whispers through overgrown fields, bending wild grasses along streets that have not felt footsteps in decades. The schoolhouse, once the heart of learning and youthful energy, now stands boarded and weathered, its windows dark and reflective. The post office, a simple wooden structure with peeling paint, holds nothing but dust and memories within. Despite the outward desolation, visitors often feel that the town is watched. Shadows twist among broken doorframes, and the faint rustle of leaves takes on the cadence of footfalls. As if the earth itself remembers the children running to class or townsfolk hurrying to the train station. The haunting at Govan is most commonly reported in the schoolhouse and post office. Inside the school, disembodied footsteps echo through empty hallways. Some visitors swear they hear the squeak of shoes on polished floors, the soft scraping of chairs against old tile, and the faint hum of children reciting lessons long forgotten. The sounds appear to come from every direction at once, impossible to locate precisely, enhancing the sense of unease. Occasionally, a cold draft sweeps through the building, brushing against arms and necks, and doors seem to rattle, even in the absence of wind. The cumulative effect is unnerving. The school feels alive with invisible students and teachers, trapped in a temporal loop that refuses to release them. The post office, though smaller, carries an equally potent sense of presence. Visitors report hearing whispered conversations, sometimes in fragmented words, as if residents were sorting mail or discussing daily events. Rusted mailboxes and counters seem to vibrate with energy when approached. And occasionally, a soft thump is heard, like a letter dropping to the floor. Some have glimpsed fleeting shapes moving behind boarded windows, or the shadow of a figure lingering near the doorway before vanishing into the surrounding trees. The building resonates with the routines of daily life, long ended, preserving the town's pulse in ghostly form. The surrounding environment amplifies the haunting. The trees around Govan sway and creak, their branches casting jagged shadows that stretch across foundations and streets. The wind carries whispers that seem almost conversational, rising and falling as though in reply to someone unseen. Footsteps are reported on grassy streets, behind abandoned homes, and along the former railway tracks, often just out of reach. Travelers recount the sensation of being followed, the air heavy with presence, and the occasional feeling of a gentle brush against the shoulder, as though acknowledging their intrusion into a space where the living no longer belong. Fog and dusk intensify the experience. As twilight falls, the schoolhouse and post office seem to shift, their outlines blending with the trees and mists rolling in from the fields. Shadows lengthen and twist unnaturally, forming fleeting images of figures paused in movement. Lantern-like glows appear at the edges of vision, sometimes moving as if following invisible paths between buildings. Visitors describe the surreal sensation of walking through a town where past and present coexist, a place where the boundary between memory and reality is blurred. Physical sensations accompany the spectral phenomena. A sudden drop in temperature, a tingling along the spine, or the inexplicable brushing of unseen hands adds a tangible element to the haunting. Even though skeptical of the paranormal report, heightened awareness, the subtle interplay of sound, shadow, and air, creating a profound sense that the town is far from empty. It is as if Govan itself, built on the lives of its former residents, has absorbed their routines, their emotions, and their essence, replaying them in fleeting moments for those willing to notice. Despite the eerie ambience, Govan holds a melancholic beauty. The ruins, softened by grass, moss, and time, create a serene yet somber tableau. Sunlight filters through the trees, casting fractured patterns across decaying wood and broken windows, while the whispers and footsteps provide a haunting soundtrack to the landscape. The ghostly presence preserves the vitality of the town in subtle, intangible ways, turning abandonment into memory made manifest. Govan is more than an empty railway town. It is a living echo of human experience. The school corridors replay lessons of the past, the post office murmurs with conversations long ended, and the surrounding trees and fields carry the whispers of lives once intertwined with the land. Visitors leave with the lingering impression that the town continues to exist, not in the present, but in memory, shadow, and sound. Footsteps, whispers, and spectral figures remind all who enter that while the trains no longer run and the streets are overgrown, the spirit of Govan endures, etched into its buildings. its trees and the quiet, watchful air of a town that refuses to be forgotten. The small town of Sherman, nestled near Govan, in eastern Washington, lies quiet and deserted, its history slowly fading into the surrounding forests. Once a modest community, Sherman's church, cemetery, and schoolhouse were central to town life. Families gathered for worship, children learned and played in the schoolhouse, and neighbors tended the cemetery, keeping the graves of loved ones honored and clean. But as the local population dwindled and residents moved toward larger towns, Sherman was abandoned. Today, the remnants of these buildings stand as silent witnesses to the lives that once animated the area, yet locals and visitors report that the town is far from empty. Shadowy figures appear at dusk, voices whisper among the trees, and the air is thick with the sense that Sherman's past refuses to rest. Approaching Sherman, the first thing visitors notice is the stillness. The dense forest presses in from all sides, evergreens and deciduous trees alike, reclaiming the town's foundations. The church, with its weathered steeple, leaning slightly, dominates the landscape, its windows darkened by time and grime. Moss and vines crawl over the stone and wood, softening the edges of decay. The schoolhouse sits a short distance away, its walls partially collapsed, the roof sagging. Nearby, the cemetery is overgrown, headstones leaning or half buried in the earth. Despite the absence of human life, there is a feeling that the town watches, that the energy of those who lived, worshipped, and worked here still lingers. The church is the focal point of many spectral sightings. Locals report seeing shadowy figures seated or kneeling in the pews, sometimes rocking back and forth as if lost in prayer or meditation. At dusk, these shapes seem to shift and grow taller, stretching along the aisles in ways that defy normal perception. Occasionally, visitors hear the faint creak of wood under weight that isn't there, the soft rustle of fabric, or whispers that rise from the empty altar. Some describe hearing hymns faintly carried on the wind, fragments of songs sung decades ago by voices now gone. The church feels alive in a way that is both comforting and unnerving, as though it preserves the devotion and presence of generations who once filled its walls. The cemetery adds another layer of haunting. Sunlight filtering through the trees casts long shadows over the weathered headstones, creating shapes that seem to move as the wind passes. Visitors often report a sense of being observed, and some claim to see figures wandering among the graves, pausing by particular stones before vanishing into the forest. On quiet afternoons, faint whispers are said to rise with the breeze, like conversations carried from the past. The combination of shadow, sound, and isolation creates an almost cinematic experience, a reminder that even in death, memory lingers, tethered to the physical world in subtle, inexplicable ways. The schoolhouse, though smaller and less imposing than the church, is equally haunting. Footsteps echo across its cracked floors, moving with the rhythm of children walking from class to class, though no living students remain. Occasionally, the sound of a chair scraping or the faint whisper of a teacher calling a name is reported. Shadows flit along the walls and across broken windows, and the faint impression of movement can be felt in corners where nothing is visible. Visitors often describe a sudden chill that sweeps through the building, coinciding with the fleeting glimpses of figures or the echo of unseen footsteps, reinforcing the sense that Sherman's history is preserved in energy as much as in wood and stone. The surrounding forest enhances the eerie atmosphere. At dusk, fog often rolls in from the lowlands, curling around trees, headstones, and the church steps. The wind carries strange, fleeting sounds, whispers, rustling, and the occasional sharp snap of a branch that seems too deliberate to be natural. Shadowy figures are frequently reported wandering among the trees or appearing at the edges of vision, sometimes peering toward the town's center before retreating into the mist. The forest feels alive with memory, replaying moments from Sherman's past in subtle, haunting ways. Despite the spectral activity, Sherman holds a quiet, melancholy beauty. The ruins, softened by moss, lichen, and tree roots, blend with the forest in a tableau of decay and memory. Light and shadow play across fallen timbers and leaning headstones, creating fleeting illusions of life returning to the abandoned town. The church, cemetery, and schoolhouse, though empty, seem imbued with the spirit of their former inhabitants, preserving rituals, routines, and fragments of daily life in ways tangible to those who enter. Sherman is more than an abandoned town. It is a living memory. Shadowy figures rock in pews, wander among graves, and trace invisible paths through the schoolhouse. Whispered voices drift on the wind, footsteps echo in empty halls, and the forest itself seems attuned to the presence of those long gone. Visitors leave with the impression that Sherman is never truly empty, that the lives and spirits of its past residents continue to inhabit the space in subtle, haunting ways. Time may have abandoned the town, but the echoes of devotion, learning, and community persist, etched into the buildings, the trees, and the quiet, watchful air of Sherman. The old county seat of Claquahueto rests quietly in the heart of Washington, a place where history and abandonment meet beneath the shadow of towering trees. Once a bustling hub of government and community life, Claquahueto's streets echoed with the steps of officials, townsfolk, and travelers alike. The town held a courthouse, a school, homes, and businesses, each contributing to a vibrant rhythm of daily life. Over time, as the county seat moved and residents relocated, Claquahueto fell into quiet decay. Today, almost all that remains are the church and its cemetery, both standing as solemn witnesses to a past that refuses to vanish completely. Locals whisper that Claquahueto is haunted. At night, the church bell tolls without human hands, and fleeting shapes glide among the overgrown graves, lingering reminders of lives once lived. Visitors approaching Claquahueto are first struck by the stillness. The dense forest has claimed most of the old town, leaving only narrow dirt paths, the church, and the cemetery partially visible through the overgrowth. Moss and ivy creep over the stone foundations of homes long gone, and the air carries the scent of damp earth and decaying timber. Even in daylight, there is a subtle tension in the atmosphere, as if the town itself is aware of being observed. The church, a simple wooden structure with faded paint and weathered shingles, stands at the center of the ghost town, its steeple rising like a silent sentinel over the fields and trees. Nearby, the cemetery sprawls unevenly, headstones leaning at odd angles, many weathered into illegibility, their presence softened by grass and wildflowers. The combination of nature, reclaiming human effort, and the lingering energy of history creates a feeling that Claquahueto exists in two times at once. The church is the focal point of Claquahueto's hauntings. Locals and explorers alike report that, even in the absence of anyone present, the bell occasionally rings, its deep toll cutting through the night air. The sound is sudden and resonant, reverberating across the empty fields and among the trees, and often disappears as quickly as it begins. Some say the bell tolls to mark a forgotten ceremony, a spiritual echo of services held long ago. Others claim it signals the presence of unseen parishioners, shadows moving through the pews or kneeling in silent prayer. Witnesses describe a cold draft that accompanies the sound, brushing over skin and rustling clothing, as if invisible figures are moving through the church while the world outside sleeps. The cemetery adds another layer of spectral activity. Overgrown with grass, brambles, and wildflowers, it exudes a melancholic beauty. Moonlight glances across the uneven headstones, casting elongated shadows that seem to shift and breathe. Visitors often report fleeting shapes moving between graves, sometimes pausing as though reading inscriptions, other times drifting silently along narrow paths. The wind through the trees carries whispers, indistinct yet unmistakably human, like conversations carried across decades. Some have described sudden chills or the sensation of being gently watched, a subtle acknowledgement from the spirits lingering among the markers of the dead. Even during the day, Claquahueto exudes an eerie presence. The forested outskirts seem to hold memories of footfalls on dirt roads and the murmur of distant voices. Shadows flicker in broken windows or behind the church's weathered doors, and the air often carries faint, inexplicable sounds. The scraping of wood, a soft sigh, or the echo of a conversation just out of reach. These phenomena are fleeting, appearing and vanishing before they can be fully understood, leaving a lingering sense of unease and fascination. The beauty of Claquado is inseparable from its melancholy. The church and cemetery, softened by nature's reclamation, create a quiet, reflective scene. Sunlight filters through trees and casts fractured patterns across gravestones and the church's worn exterior. The mixture of decay and life, silence and subtle activity, gives the impression that Claquado is alive in memory and spirit, preserving the echoes of its former community in ways tangible to those who venture here. Even abandoned, the town retains a pulse, a quiet reminder of the lives that once filled it. Claquado is more than an abandoned town. It is a repository of memory, presence, and lingering energy. The church bell tolls without hands, shadows move silently among graves, and whispers drift through trees and air alike. Visitors often leave with the impression that they have not merely explored ruins, but stepped into a place where the past continues to exist, quietly observing and replaying fragments of its history. The town's spirits seem tied to the structures and land, carrying routines, prayers, and memories through time, ensuring that Claquado's story is never fully lost. For those who linger at dusk or under a moonlit sky, Claquado is a place where the boundary between life and memory blurs. The church, the cemetery, and the surrounding forests hold a subtle, persistent presence, a reminder that even when towns are abandoned and streets fall silent, the echoes of human life continue to inhabit the spaces we leave behind. Shadows, whispers, and the occasional tolling bell preserve Claquado's spirit, offering visitors a glimpse into a past that lingers. Haunting yet strangely beautiful, in the quiet corners of this old county seat, nestled deep within the Colville National Forest, the ghost town of Bodie sits as a silent testament to ambition, labor, and the relentless passage of time. Once a modest hub for timber and mining operations, Bodie thrived in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Its wooden cabins and work buildings lined narrow dirt paths, while the sounds of axes striking timber, hammers shaping tools, and the hum of miners at work filled the crisp forest air. The town's population was small but vibrant, bound together by the hard work of extracting the forest's wealth and the camaraderie of shared struggle. Over time, as resources dwindled and economic pressures mounted, Bodie was abandoned, leaving behind only the skeletal remains of its structures. Today, the town is almost entirely reclaimed by the forest, but hikers and explorers often report that Bodie is far from empty. Phantom footsteps echo along overgrown paths, whispers drift from the trees, and the cabins themselves seem to groan and creak as if alive with unseen inhabitants. Approaching Bodie, the first impression is the weight of history. Dense evergreens and tangled undergrowth press close to the remnants of the town, their shadows stretching across moss-covered foundations and rotting timber. The cabins, many with collapsed roofs or missing walls, jut from the forest floor at odd angles, their wooden boards weathered to dull gray. Rusted mining tools, old lanterns, and fragments of machinery peek through fallen debris, hinting at the industrious past of the town's few dozen residents. Even during daylight, there is a tangible sense that Bodie remembers an atmosphere thick with echoes of footsteps, labor, and daily life that can be felt in the shifting light and the whisper of the wind through the trees. At night, Bodie's haunting intensifies. Visitors often describe hearing footsteps along the old paths, crunching leaves, and snapping twigs, moving with deliberate pace, yet never appearing to originate from a visible source. The sounds are varied, a heavy boot striking soft earth, a lighter shuffle of someone moving quickly, or the distant scrape of a hammer on wood or stone. Hikers frequently pause, trying to locate the origin of these sounds, only to find empty cabins and shadowed forest. The forest itself seems to amplify and distort these noises, creating the impression that Bodie is alive with unseen laborers replaying their daily routines. The cabins are at the center of many spectral experiences. Shadows flit behind broken windows, sometimes moving in coordination with the sound of footsteps or soft whispers. Doors swing slightly on rusted hinges despite the absence of wind, and boards creak as though bearing weight that should not be there. Inside, visitors have reported sudden drops in temperature, a chill that passes over them without warning, and the subtle sensation of being watched. Some claim to glimpse figures bending over old tools, inspecting a wall, or walking along the cabin floor, only to vanish when approached. The effect is disorienting, the mixture of visual, auditory, and physical cues creating a strong sense of lingering presence that defies rational explanation. Whispers are a recurring phenomenon in Bodhi. At times, they seem to emanate from the cabins themselves, low and indistinct, like conversations carried from another time. Other times, they drift through the trees, rising with the wind and fading into silence. Some hikers swear the voices are not random. They carry intonation and cadence, as though speaking to one another, discussing tasks, or calling names. The effect is subtle but persistent, often leaving a sense of unease, as if one has stumbled into a place where the past continues to replay itself, unaware of the present. The environment of Bodhi enhances the haunting. Fog often rolls through the forest at dusk or early morning, curling around cabins, fallen logs, and abandoned paths. Moonlight filters through dense branches, casting fragmented shadows that shift and dance with the breeze. The combination of light, shadow, and mist creates fleeting illusions, flickers of movement that vanish when focused upon, making the forest appear alive with memory and spectral presence. The natural decay of the town, softened by moss, lichen, and undergrowth, transforms the ruins into a stage where time seems to loop endlessly. Despite the eerie atmosphere, Bodhi possesses a haunting beauty. Rusted tools glint faintly in sunlight. Moss-covered boards curve gracefully toward the earth, and the forest embraces the abandoned town in a silent, watchful hush. The interplay of human effort and natural reclamation creates a tableau of melancholy and awe, where visitors are confronted simultaneously with history, decay, and the presence of those who once lived and labored here. Bodhi is more than an abandoned timber and mining town. It is a repository of memory and spirit. Phantom footsteps echo along paths, whispers drift through the trees, and cabins creak as if inhabited by unseen residents. Visitors often leave with the sense that they have walked through a place where the past is preserved, not only in wood and stone but in sound, shadow, and air. Bodhi endures, a ghostly echo of human toil, ambition, and community, eternally intertwined with the forest that surrounds it, where the spirits of miners and timber workers continue their silent, spectral routines, ensuring that the town's story is never truly forgotten. Tucked away in the rugged hills of Washington, the old copper mining settlement of Copper City sits abandoned, almost entirely reclaimed by the forest. Once a bustling hub of activity, the town thrived in the late 1800s and early 1900s, fueled by the extraction of rich copper veins that promised wealth and opportunity. Wooden cabins and company buildings lined narrow streets. Smoke rose from small furnaces, and the rhythmic hammering of miners echoed through the valley. Families settled here, children played in the dusty lanes, and life moved to the cadence of pickaxes, striking rock and carts rolling along narrow tracks. But as the veins ran dry and mining profits declined, the town slowly emptied, leaving behind only crumbling structures, rusted equipment, and the dense forest that has grown around it. Today, Copper City is largely overgrown, yet those who venture here speak of a haunting presence, a spectral echo of the miners and townsfolk who once called it home. Lanterns glow where no one stands, footsteps strike the earth without source, and whispers carry across empty streets, as though the town's past refuses to rest. Arriving at Copper City, visitors first notice the forest reclaiming the settlement. Trees rise through broken foundations, moss carpets, wooden floors, and vines creep across walls that once held windows or doors. The skeletal frames of cabins lean unevenly, the roofs caved in or missing entirely, while rusted mining tools and machinery peek through the undergrowth. The air is heavy with the scent of damp wood and soil, and the quiet is deep. punctuated only by distant birdsong or the wind through the trees. Yet beneath this silence is an uncanny energy, subtle but persistent, as though the town itself remembers the labor, laughter, and toil that once animated its streets. The hauntings of Copper City are most pronounced at dusk and night. Lanterns, faint and flickering, are frequently reported in windows or along paths where no living person walks. Their glow is soft, amber-colored, often appearing to drift slowly as though carried by unseen hands. Some visitors have described these lights moving among collapsed cabins, pausing near tools or machinery before vanishing entirely. The lanterns create an unsettling atmosphere, illuminating decaying wood and moss in ghostly patterns, and giving the impression that spectral miners continue to navigate the streets, carrying out routines long ended. Footsteps are another common phenomenon. Along overgrown pathways and among the ruins, visitors hear the rhythmic crunch of boots on dirt, the occasional scrape of metal on wood, and the clatter of tools striking stone. The sounds vary in intensity, sometimes distant and soft, other times sharp and startlingly close. No matter where one looks, there is no visible source, and the noises often seem to move independently, coming from multiple directions at once. Hikers report feeling watched, their senses heightened as though the town itself observes their intrusion. The combination of light, sound, and unseen presence makes Copper City a place where time feels distorted, the past replaying over the present. The forest amplifies Copper City's haunting. Fog frequently rolls through the settlement, curling around cabins and mining debris, muting sound and warping perception. Shadows stretch unnaturally in moonlight, forming shapes that flicker and twist with the wind. Lanterns glow faintly through mist and broken windows, and the figures of spectral miners seem to appear and disappear at the edge of vision. The natural decay of the buildings, softened by moss and undergrowth, creates an eerie stage, a liminal space where the boundary between the living and the spectral feels thin. Inside the remnants of cabins and workshops, other phenomena occur. Doors creak on rusted hinges, as though recently opened, and sometimes tools are found displaced, even when no one has entered. A sudden chill often accompanies these events, passing over the skin and leaving a tingling awareness that something unseen is near. Whispered voices, fragmented and indistinct, are reported drifting through rooms and corridors, echoing conversations of long-past miners. The sounds, though subtle, create an immersive sense of history lingering in the air, a town preserved not just in ruins, but in energy. Despite its haunting qualities, Copper City holds a melancholy beauty. Moss-covered wood glows softly in the filtered sunlight, wildflowers sprout from collapsed cabins, and the forest weaves a green tapestry over rusted tools and broken foundations. The spectral lights and sounds create an atmosphere that is both eerie and mesmerizing, a reminder of human ambition and labor long ended. Visitors often leave with the impression that they have walked through a place where the past continues to move. A town alive with memory, shadow, and spectral presence. Copper City is more than an abandoned settlement. It is a living echo of its miners and inhabitants. Lanterns glow where no one stands, phantom footsteps resound on overgrown paths, and whispers drift among the ruins. The town's spectral activity preserves the rhythms of life and labor, replaying moments from a bygone era with subtle persistence. Though the forest has claimed its streets and buildings, the spirits of Copper City endure, tethered to the land and the copper veins that once promised fortune, ensuring that even in silence and decay, the town's story continues to be told. Perched near the Canadian border, the abandoned gold mining town of Old Molson stands as a frozen memory of ambition, labor, and the rugged lives of prospectors. During its heyday in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Old Molson thrived on the promise of gold, drawing miners, merchants, and families to its remote location. Wooden cabins and shingled buildings lined dusty streets. Smoke rose from stoves in small homes, and the clang of mining tools echoed from the hills. Life revolved around the schoolhouse, where children learned amidst the rough backdrop of frontier life, and the general store, which supplied essentials and served as a gathering place for news and conversation. But as the gold veins depleted and mining became unsustainable, the town emptied, leaving behind crumbling foundations, abandoned buildings, and a silence that seemed unnatural in the rugged wilderness. Today, only fragments of old Molson remain intact: the schoolhouse, the general store, and a scattering of cabins, but those who venture here report that the town is far from lifeless. Ghostly silhouettes pace the streets under moonlight. Footsteps echo where no one walks, and the air carries faint whispers from another time. Arriving at Old Molson, visitors are immediately struck by the eerie stillness. The surrounding hills are dense with evergreens and brush, pressing close to the town's weathered buildings. The streets, long abandoned, are overgrown with grass and weeds. But the layout of the town remains clearly visible, a skeletal map of past life. The schoolhouse, with its boarded windows and faded paint, stands as a solemn reminder of children who once ran through its halls. The general store, roof slightly caved and shelves still visible through broken windows, evokes the daily routines of residents, buying necessities, exchanging news, and gathering at the heart of the community. Even in daylight, there is a palpable sense that Old Molson is remembered, its energy lingering in the wind, in the air between buildings, and in the shadows cast by the forests surrounding it. The hauntings of Old Molson are most pronounced at night, when moonlight bathes the streets in silver. Visitors often report ghostly silhouettes pacing along the paths, moving deliberately as if retracing the footsteps of former residents. The figures are fleeting, often disappearing when approached, leaving only the impression of movement and presence. Some witnesses describe seeing a miner carrying tools across the street, pausing near a cabin, or a child moving toward the schoolhouse before vanishing into shadow. These apparitions create a surreal, almost cinematic scene. The town is simultaneously abandoned and alive, replaying moments from its vibrant past under the glow of the moon. Footsteps echo along the streets, the sound sharp against a quiet night. The rhythmic shuffle of boots, the clatter of tools, and the occasional soft thump create the sense of activity without origin. Inside the schoolhouse, faint sounds of children running, desks scraping, and voices calling names are reported. In the general store, the soft rustle of movement among the empty shelves is said to occur, accompanied by the whisper of conversations from long ago. These auditory phenomena are subtle but persistent, adding depth to the town's spectral presence, as though the echoes of Old Molson's residents are preserved in the very fabric of its structures. Shadows are ever present in Old Molson, stretching unnaturally under moonlight or flickering through broken windows. They move independently, sometimes passing along streets, other times drifting across building facades. Fog, rolling in from the hills or descending through the streets at night, amplifies these illusions, wrapping the buildings in a gray haze that makes it difficult to distinguish between shadow and substance. Lantern-like glows are occasionally reported inside cabins or behind the general store, lights flickering without flame, giving the impression of miners or townsfolk still at work despite decades of abandonment. Even during the day, visitors feel a sense of lingering energy. The air is heavy with memory, carrying subtle sounds that resemble conversations or footsteps, or the faint creak of wood as if a door is opened by invisible hands. The buildings, though deteriorating, seem to absorb and project these energies, preserving routines, emotions, and fragments of daily life for those who enter. Overgrown streets and moss-covered walls create a scene of natural beauty intertwined with haunting, a reminder of human ambition, labor, and the passage of time. Old Molson is a town where history and haunting coexist. Ghostly silhouettes pace the streets, phantom footsteps echo across overgrown pathways, and whispered voices drift from buildings long abandoned. The schoolhouse and general store, central to the town's former life, hold the strongest echoes, preserving scenes of learning, commerce, and daily interaction. Visitors often leave with a deep sense of having walked not only through ruins but through time itself, observing the replay of lives and routines now long gone. Though the town has been reclaimed by the forest and its gold veins have long been exhausted, The spirits of old Molson endure. The silhouettes in the moonlight, the footsteps in empty streets, and the whispers among broken walls serve as reminders that while physical structures may decay, memory, energy, and presence can persist. Old Molson remains a haunting, melancholic, and beautiful testament to the people who lived and labored there, a ghost town where the past is never fully gone and the echoes of history continue to roam beneath the silver glow of night. Nestled deep in the rugged wilderness of Okanogan County, the abandoned mining town of Nighthawk sits quietly, a ghostly remnant of ambition and labor, now swallowed by forest and brush. During the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Nighthawk thrived as miners flocked to the area, hoping to strike wealth from the rocky hills. Wooden cabins lined dirt roads, the general store bustled with trade, and the rhythmic sounds of hammers, picks, and sluicing water filled the air. Families lived here in relative isolation, tied to the routines of extraction and survival, bound together by a community forged in the wilderness. Over time, as the mines yielded less, and the town's population dwindled, Nighthawk fell into silence. Today, its weathered structures remain, scattered across overgrown streets, while the surrounding forest creeps closer with each passing year. Yet visitors who wander its remnants report that Nighthawk is far from empty. Strange lights flicker in windows, ghostly shadows drift along abandoned paths, and the echoes of old mining tools can be heard at night, as if the town's past refuses to rest. Trees and undergrowth have claimed the roads, their branches brushing against rotting timber and leaning cabins. Moss and lichen coat the wooden structures, softening the harsh lines of decay, and the air carries the subtle scent of damp earth and decomposing wood. Broken windows reflect the dim sunlight in fractured patterns, casting the forest inside the remnants of buildings. Even during the day, there is a strange energy, hair attention, that seems to hum in the silence. A lingering presence that makes the abandoned town feel more like a paused memory than a forgotten ruin. Nighthawk's paranormal activity is most pronounced at night. Locals and explorers frequently report flickering lights inside cabins where no one lives. These lights, sometimes amber, sometimes blue-white, appear and vanish suddenly, as if carried by invisible hands or sparked by memories embedded in the walls. Witnesses describe glimpsing shadows moving past the glow, figures bending over tools, walking down streets, or pausing near windows before dissolving into darkness. The effect is disorienting. The town feels alive with invisible residents, replaying routines long abandoned, their presence tangible yet impossible to fully observe. Footsteps are a recurring phenomenon on overgrown streets and along paths that once led to cabins and mining areas. The crunch of boots on dirt and gravel can be heard, sometimes approaching and receding in patterns that suggest deliberate movement. Visitors often pause, scanning the darkness, yet the source remains unseen. In the cabins, faint sounds of tools striking wood or metal echo through the rooms, accompanied by creaks and groans of old structures, shifting with invisible weight. Some hikers report sudden chills, an almost tactile sensation of unseen figures brushing past, and the feeling that the town is aware of their intrusion. Windows are particularly unsettling in Nighthawk. Many are broken or boarded, yet, at night, they seem to flicker with life. Shadows pass across panes, faint reflections of figures that vanish when approached. Occasionally, the windows glow from within, as though lanterns hang in invisible hands, illuminating walls and floors in shifting light. Observers describe these moments as simultaneously mesmerizing and unnerving, reinforcing the sense that the town's past is not fully gone but lingering, playing out as if trapped in an endless loop of memory. The surrounding wilderness adds to the haunting atmosphere. Fog rolls through the trees at dusk, curling around cabins and along paths, muting sound and distorting perception. Moonlight filters through branches, creating long, shifting shadows that seem to move independently. The forest itself feels aware, alive with memory, carrying whispers of conversation, laughter, and labor on the wind. Even the natural decay, the fallen logs, moss-covered stones, and collapsed roofs adds to the spectral tableau, framing the abandoned town in a scene where history and haunting coexist. Despite its eerie reputation, Nighthawk possesses a melancholy beauty. The interplay of nature and decay, light and shadow, creates a hauntingly poetic setting. Rusted tools glint faintly in moonlight. Moss carpets, the remnants of cabins, and the forest's green embrace softens the harsh outlines of abandoned structures. The occasional flicker of light or echo of movement enhances the feeling of connection to the past, allowing visitors to sense the presence of those who lived, labored, and dreamed here long ago. Nighthawk is more than an abandoned mining town. It is a repository of memory and spectral energy. Strange lights illuminate empty cabins, phantom footsteps strike overgrown streets, and the echoes of long-gone miners' tools resonate in the darkness. Shadows drift along paths and through windows. Whispers carry across the forest, and the air feels thick with history. Visitors often leave with the impression that they have walked through a place where the past continues to breathe, a town where memory and spirit intertwine. Though its buildings crumble and the forest encroaches, Nighthawk endures a haunting, timeless witness to human ambition, labor, and the restless echoes of life that once thrived in the heart of Okanogan County. Deep within the dense forests of Washington, Bodie Junction sits as a forgotten testament to the logging industry that once carved its place into the rugged landscape. Established in the late 19th century, this settlement thrived on the relentless work of loggers who hauled timber from the surrounding forests to supply the region's growing towns and cities. Cabins, bunkhouses, and sawmills clustered along dirt roads, and the air was alive with the rhythmic pounding of axes, the creak of timber carts, and the chatter of men who made their living from the forest. Families and workers lived side by side in this remote outpost, bound together by the harsh realities of frontier life. Over time, as logging operations moved on and timber resources dwindled, Bodie Junction fell silent. The cabins rotted, the mills collapsed, and the forest slowly reclaimed the settlement. Yet, those who wander its ruins report that Bodie Junction is far from empty. Timber ghosts roam the fog-draped forests. Axes remain half-buried in soft soil, as if waiting for hands that will never return. And the air is thick with the sense of unseen eyes, watching every step. Approaching Bodie Junction, visitors are immediately struck by the weight of history pressing from the trees. The forest has swallowed most of the settlement, leaving narrow paths overgrown with ferns, moss, and brambles. Collapsed cabins peeked through the green, their roofs caved and walls leaning at impossible angles. Rusted tools and broken machinery are scattered across the forest floor, some half buried in soil or covered by fallen logs. The atmosphere is heavy, yet strangely still. Even birds and animals seem subdued within the shadow of the ruins. Walking through Bodie Junction, it is impossible not to feel the echo of human activity, the memory of labor that once filled this place, lingering like a faint pulse beneath the forest canopy. The hauntings of Bodie Junction are strongest at night. Fog frequently rolls through the trees, curling around fallen logs and dilapidated cabins, softening the outlines of the ruins and muting distant sounds. Within this mist, visitors often report glimpses of shadowy figures moving among the trees. Some appear to wield axes, their movements methodical and deliberate, as if engaged in work that has continued long past the lives of those performing it. Others drift silently along the overgrown roads, vanishing when approached, leaving only the faintest imprint of a shape or the subtle impression of being observed. The fog and the forest's shadows combine to create an environment where perception is unreliable, heightening the sense that Bodie Junction is alive with memory and spectral presence. Half-buried tools are a common sight, and many claim they are more than remnants. They are markers of lingering energy. Axes thrust into soft earth seem to quiver slightly at times, or reflect faint, flickering light in the darkness. Rusted saws and hammers, left in the open, feel charged with the labor of their long-dead owners. Hikers report hearing the scrape of a saw through timber, or the hollow strike of an axe against wood, even when the forest is completely silent. These auditory phenomena are subtle but persistent, adding a dimension of tactile memory to the visual haunting. The settlement becomes an interactive ghost story, where every step, through mossy paths and collapsed cabins reinforces the presence of those who once walked these woods. Shadows in Bodie Junction are never still. They drift along fallen beams and through the trunks of towering trees, sometimes forming humanoid shapes, other times flickering as if caught between dimensions. Observers describe feeling watched, the sensation that unseen eyes track their movements as they traverse the paths. The forest itself contributes to the spectral effect, its sounds branches creaking, leaves rustling, distant owls calling blending with phantom footsteps to create a symphony of memory and haunting. Occasionally, fleeting lights are seen through the mist, small glimmers that resemble lanterns, moving as though carried by loggers long gone. The effect is eerie and mesmerizing, a glimpse into a world where time loops endlessly through shadow, fog, and recollection. Even during daylight, Bodie Junction retains a subtle, haunting energy. The forest seems to lean closer to the ruins, branches brushing against broken walls, moss carpeting fallen beams, and the wind carrying faint echoes of conversation and labor. Rusted tools glint in sunlight, and shadows from the canopy play across foundations, as though guiding visitors along invisible paths. The settlement's decay and reclamation by nature create a scene of melancholy beauty, where human endeavor and the forest's persistent life coexist, and where the past feels almost tangible. Bodie Junction is more than an abandoned logging town. It is a repository of memory and lingering presence. Timber ghosts roam fog-draped forests, axes remain half-buried, and faint sounds of long-past labor echo across the settlement. Shadows drift among broken cabins, fleeting lights appear where no one stands, and the air carries a persistent sense of observation. Visitors often leave with the feeling that they have walked through more than ruins. They have stepped into a place where time folds upon itself, where the work of generations continues unseen, and where the forest preserves not only physical remnants, but the spirits of those who labored there. Bodie Junction endures, a haunting, living memory of ambition, toil, and the spectral echoes of the logging community that once thrived within its misty, overgrown embrace. The Yakult Burn area, deep in the dense forests of southwestern Washington, is a place where history, fire, and wilderness converge to create an atmosphere thick with mystery. Unlike the abandoned towns scattered across the region, this is not a settlement with streets and cabins. It is a forest scarred by one of the largest wildfires in Pacific Northwest history. The fire of 1902 swept through miles of dense pine, leaving behind charred trunks, blackened earth, and a landscape forever changed. Over a century later, the forest has regrown, but the echoes of devastation linger, intertwined with the dense canopy and twisting trails. Hikers and explorers who venture into this area often speak of strange sounds, ghostly knocks echoing among the trees, and shadowy figures that seem to watch from the darkness. Many locals whisper that the Yakult Burn area is haunted not by human residents, but by the spirits of the land itself, ancient entities that stir among the pines. Walking into the Yakult Burn area, visitors first notice the eerie stillness. The forest floor is uneven, littered with fallen trees, tangled roots, and patches of blackened earth where fire once consumed all. Towering pines rise above, their dense branches filtering sunlight into fractured patterns that dance across the ground. Moss and ferns reclaim the burned soil, softening the harsh scars of the fire. But the skeletal remains of charred trees jut into the sky like silent sentinels. Even in daylight, the forest feels alive with unseen presence. A breeze rustles through the branches, carrying whispers that seem to originate from nowhere. There is an immediate awareness of the forest's history, its tragedy, its resilience, and the lingering energy of lives and events long past. Night in the Yakult Burn area transforms the forest into an otherworldly realm. Shadows twist and stretch under the pale light of the moon, creating illusions of movement among the trees. Visitors report ghostly knocks alow, rhythmic sounds that echo as if someone or something is walking unseen along fallen logs or across the underbrush. These sounds are often accompanied by distant whispers, unintelligible but unmistakably deliberate. floating through the forest like voices from another time. The combination of noise and shadow gives the impression that the forest itself is inhabited by invisible entities, watching and reacting to those who dare to intrude. Shadowy figures are the most commonly reported phenomena. They are rarely clear or distinct, often glimpsed from the corner of the eye, fleeting forms that vanish when looked at directly. Some appear humanoid, moving with deliberate steps among the blackened trunks, while others are more ambiguous shapes that glide between the trees, emerging and disappearing with the shifting fog or the sway of branches. Witnesses describe a profound sense of being observed, a feeling that unseen eyes follow their movements through the dense undergrowth. Even hikers who are familiar with the forest report a creeping unease, as if they are trespassing not on land, but on a territory inhabited by something beyond human comprehension. Knocks and sounds are often connected to the remnants of the fire. Hollow logs resonate when struck, branches fall in isolated, unexplained ways, and distant thumps echo across ravines. Some interpret these noises as the spirits of the forest entities, tied to the land long before the fire and carrying the memory of the destruction it wrought. Others describe hearing footsteps that do not belong to any animal, soft rustling of clothing, or faint voices repeating phrases that dissolve into the wind. These auditory experiences contribute to the sense that the Yakko Burn area is alive, a space where memory, energy, and nature converge into an enduring haunting. Even during the day, the area holds an unsettling power. The interplay of light and shadow among regrown pines creates constant movement, shapes forming and vanishing with the sun's angle. Fog often drifts through the burned areas, curling around trees and snaking through underbrush, making it difficult to distinguish between living presence and optical illusion. Visitors report feeling watched, sudden chills that pass over the skin without explanation, and the subtle impression that the forest responds to their presence. The air carries a palpable weight of history of lives lost, of fire's destructive force, and of the ancient spirits said to inhabit the dense woods. The Yakko Burn area is more than a forest scarred by fire. It is a place where memory and spirit seem intertwined with the landscape itself. Strange knocks echo among charred and living trees. Shadowy figures drift between trunks and fog, and whispers carry through the dense undergrowth. The spirits that roam here are not easily categorized. They are remnants of tragedy, echoes of ancient presence, and the restless energy of a forest that has endured both natural catastrophe and human intrusion. Hikers and explorers leave with the sense that they have stepped into a living memory, a place where time folds and the past never truly fades. Though no cabins or towns remain, the Yakko Burn area endures as a haunting, mysterious forest. The echoing knocks, ghostly shadows, and whispered voices ensure that the tragedy of fire, the resilience of nature, and the spectral memory of the land itself remain ever present. In this forest, the unseen eyes of the past watch silently, and the spirits of the Yakko Burn continue to roam beneath the swaying pines, ensuring that the haunting story of this wilderness is never forgotten. Nestled along the rugged curves of Mountain Loop Highway, the Limekill Trail settlement is a relic of a bygone era where industry and wilderness once collided. Centuries ago, the area thrived with small-scale lime production, and miners and laborers carved kildens into the hillsides to extract the valuable mineral. Wooden cabins, now mostly weathered and decayed, dotted the landscape, housing families who eked out a living amidst the dense forests of the Pacific Northwest. The kilns themselves, blackened by fire and time, stand as solemn monuments to the labor and industry that shaped the region. Today, the settlement is largely abandoned, overgrown by moss, ferns, and the relentless encroachment of the forest. But hikers and explorers who venture along the trail report that Limekill Trail settlement is far from silent. Whispers seem to rise from the shadows, cold spots make the air feel alive with unseen presence, and fleeting figures appear among the trees, as if the land itself retains the memory of its human and spectral inhabitants. Approaching the settlement, visitors noticed a striking contrast between the forest's natural beauty and the remnants of human labor. The kilns, built from heavy stone, are cracked and blackened, their openings dark like eyes staring into the past. Cabins lean at impossible angles, roofs collapsed or missing entirely, and the forest floor is littered with rotting timbers, rusted tools, and broken glass. Sunlight filters through the dense canopy, casting fractured shadows that dance across moss-covered foundations and stonework. Even in daylight, there is an unsettling energy, a subtle feeling that the past lingers, replaying moments of labor, ritual, and daily life among the ruins. The hauntings of Limekiln Trail Settlement are most noticeable at twilight and night. As the sun sinks behind the hills, shadows lengthen, stretching across the kilns and cabins. Visitors often report whispers, faint and unintelligible, echoing through the trees or along the trail. Sometimes the voices appear to follow hikers, rising and falling with the wind, as if carried by unseen mouths or spirits lingering just out of sight. Cold spots are common, sudden drops in temperature that pass over the skin without explanation, often near the kilns themselves or the threshold of a collapsed cabin. These chills create a physical reminder that the place is more than abandoned, is alive with residual energy, memories, and perhaps the lingering presence of those who once lived and labored here. Shadows are a persistent feature of the settlement's haunting. They drift among the trees, passing through broken windows and leaning walls, moving independently of wind or light. Hikers describe seeing figures that seem human but lack detail, elongated and distorted by the forest's dim light. These apparitions appear momentarily before vanishing, leaving only the impression of movement and presence. Some witnesses have reported the sensation of being watched, the forest and ruins conspiring to remind them that they are not alone. Lantern-like glows sometimes flicker within the kilns or behind cabins, though no fire burns and no one remains to carry the lights. These glimpses, subtle yet striking, reinforce the sense that the settlement's past continues to unfold in layers just beyond perception. The kilns themselves are the heart of Limekiln Trail Settlement's mystery. Blackened and hollow, they seem to hum with energy, resonating faintly when the wind passes through their openings. Some hikers claim that chanting or low murmurs rise from the stone interiors, as if spectral figures are performing rituals that have endured through time. Others report seeing flickers of movement inside, shadows that pass across the walls and floor, vanishing when approached. The combination of sound, cold, and light creates an immersive experience, where the forest and ruins act as vessels for memory and haunting. Even the forest surrounding the settlement contributes to the eerie atmosphere. Mist often drifts along the trail, weaving through trees and curling around the kilns, muting sound and casting ghostly veils across the ruins. Fallen logs and moss-covered rocks create natural barriers that obscure vision, making glimpses of movement or light even more unsettling. Birds and animals are often silent, adding to the sense of unnatural stillness, broken only by the faint echoes of whispers or the soft scrape of unseen footsteps. The interplay between natural decay, overgrowth, and spectral activity gives the settlement a feeling of being suspended between worlds, neither fully alive nor completely abandoned. Limekiln Trail Settlement is more than an abandoned industrial site. It is a place where memory, labor, and spirit converge. Whispers echo through the trees. Cold spots mark the presence of unseen visitors, and shadows drift among kilns and cabins as if replaying long-forgotten routines. The kilns themselves hum with energy, a focal point for spectral rituals and residual presence. Visitors often leave with the impression that they have walked through a place where time folds, where past and present intersect, and where the energy of those who lived and worked here persists beyond death and decay. The settlement endures as a haunting testament to human endeavor, forest reclamation, and the mysterious forces that linger among the ruins. Even in silence, Limekiln Trail Settlement speaks, carrying its whispers, shadows, and cold drafts into the modern world, ensuring that the echoes of history and spirit continue to roam beneath the dense pines. High in the rugged Cascades of Washington State, the Wellington Avalanche Site is a solemn and haunting reminder of one of the deadliest natural disasters in American history. On a fateful day in 1910, a massive avalanche descended upon the small railroad town of Wellington, burying trains, buildings, and nearly an entire community beneath tons of snow and ice. 96 people perished that day, their lives abruptly ended amid the frozen roar of the mountains. Today, the forested slopes remain silent during the day, yet those who venture into the area often report a chilling presence. Phantom train whistles echo across the ridges, distant cries pierce the stillness, and shadowy figures appear on the snow-covered slopes, vanishing when approached. The Wellington Avalanche site is more than a historical landmark. It is a place where tragedy and memory linger in the very air, shaping the landscape into a corridor of spectral echoes. Arriving at the site, visitors are struck by the contrast between serene wilderness and the echoes of past catastrophe. Towering evergreens cover steep slopes, their branches heavy with snow in winter and thick with needles in warmer months. Trails cut through the forest are lined with moss-covered rocks and fallen logs, the remnants of centuries of natural growth reclaiming the land. Yet, even in this peaceful setting, there is a palpable tension, a sense that the mountains themselves remember the devastation that unfolded here. The snow-covered ridges, glistening in sunlight or shrouded in fog, carry the weight of history, and hikers report feeling an invisible presence pressing close as they move along the trails. The hauntings of Wellington are most pronounced during winter or in early spring, when snow still blankets the slopes. Visitors often describe hearing the distant whistle of a train, sharp and metallic, cutting through the stillness of the forest. The sound is eerily precise, as though a locomotive is approaching from the past, yet no tracks or engines remain. Some say it is the sound of trains caught in the avalanche, forever repeating their final journey. Others hear the faint creak of timber collapsing, or the muffled voices of workers calling to one another, carried faintly across the frozen landscape. The effect is both unsettling and sorrowful, a ghostly symphony that evokes the terror and confusion of that tragic day. Shadowy figures are a constant presence on the slopes. They appear at the edge of the forest, partially obscured by trees or drifting across snowfields, moving slowly as though searching or retracing steps long forgotten. Hikers report seeing workers in early 20th century clothing, carrying tools or gesturing as they climb invisible tracks through the snow. Children and townsfolk are occasionally glimpsed near old cabin ruins, their forms fleeting and indistinct, vanishing when approached. These spectral appearances seem tied to specific spots, collapsed train sites, frozen slopes, and ravines where the avalanche's force was most deadly. Witnesses often describe a cold sensation when these figures are present, a chill that passes through the body as if the mountain itself mourns the lives lost. The forest amplifies the spectral phenomena. Snow muffles footsteps and carries sounds with unnatural clarity, making distant cries or whistles appear closer than they should. Branches groan under the weight of snow, and fallen trees shift with sudden, unexplained creaks, contributing to the impression of movement among the dead. Fog often descends rapidly from the ridges, wrapping the area in a gray haze that obscures vision and bends perception. In this mist, shadowy forms and distant lights appear and vanish, and even experienced hikers report feelings of disorientation, as if the landscape is alive with memory and sorrow. Even during the warmer months, when the snow has melted, the Wellington Avalanche site retains a haunting presence. The slopes, though green and vibrant, seem heavy with history. Whispered voices and faint echoes are reported among the trees. Footsteps crunch on dead leaves, and unexplained cold spots appear near rocks and ravines. The forest seems to watch, its dense foliage carrying remnants of past events. And the trails that wind through the area often feel like pathways through memory itself. Visitors leave with a deep impression that the land remembers, and that those lost in the avalanche remain tied to the mountains, replaying fragments of their final moments for those who passed through. The Wellington Avalanche site is a place where tragedy, memory, and haunting intertwine. Phantom train whistles echo along snowy slopes. Cries of the lost reverberate through the forest, and shadowy figures appear and vanish as if trapped between worlds. The land itself seems to pulse with residual energy, preserving the memory of lives abruptly ended and the horror of that fateful day. Hikers and visitors feel the weight of history in every step, the presence of unseen witnesses in every sound, and the sorrow of lost souls in the cold wind that sweeps across the ridges. Though more than a century has passed since the disaster, the site endures as a chilling testament to human fragility and the raw power of nature. The echoes of trains, the whispers of the dead, and the shadowy figures on snow-covered slopes ensure that Wellington is never truly silent. It is a place where history lives, where tragedy lingers, and where the spirits of the avalanche continue to roam, leaving an indelible mark on all who venture into these haunted mountains. Port Townsend, perched at the northeastern tip of the Olympic Peninsula in Washington, is a town where history and fog intertwine to create an atmosphere thick with mystery. Its Victorian-era buildings line the streets, their ornate facades and towering spires reflecting the ambitions of a town that once aspired to be the San Francisco of the Pacific Northwest. Today, the architecture stands as a testament to the past, weathered yet proud, and surrounded by the dense forests and misty coastline that give Port Townsend its haunting character. Visitors often remark that the town feels alive with the echoes of history. Shadowy sailors wander the wharves, elegant ladies drift along empty streets, and the thick fog that curls through alleys and over docks seems to carry whispers from another century. Even without the presence of modern activity, the town's atmosphere suggests that the past has never fully released its hold. Walking through Port Townsend, one is immediately struck by the juxtaposition of architectural beauty and eerie quiet. The streets are lined with Victorian homes, their gables, turrets, and decorative trim recalling a period of ambition and prosperity. Many buildings are unoccupied, their windows dark, yet they seem to watch with an almost sentient awareness. Narrow alleyways wind between structures, often shrouded in mist that softens edges and muffles sound. Even in daylight, the town carries a subtle tension, an invisible weight that hints at lives lived and lost, of histories that continue to linger within the walls. The forest surrounding the town contributes to this effect, its dense growth pressing close to the streets, creating shadows that move with the breeze and play tricks on the eye. The wharves and waterfront are central to Port Townsend's ghostly reputation. Long ago, the town's economy thrived on maritime trade, with ships arriving from distant ports and sailors walking the streets in search of work, drink, or leisure. Today, the water laps quietly against empty docks, and fog often drifts in from the Strait of Juan de Fuca, curling around pilings and warehouses. Visitors report seeing figures in period clothing, men with naval coats and caps, lingering near the edge of the water. Sometimes they appear to glance toward the horizon, their forms solid enough to cast shadows but dissolving when approached. These spectral sailors are said to be echoes of a time when the harbor was alive with commerce and the restless energy of maritime life. Their presence is often accompanied by sounds of footsteps, the creak of ropes and timber, and the faint echo of voices carried by the wind across the water. The town's streets are no less haunted. Fog rolls through alleys and plazas, creating illusions of movement, and locals speak of ghostly ladies gliding across brick sidewalks, dresses sweeping behind them as if caught in a gentle breeze. Some appear to pause at shuttered windows, peering inside before vanishing into the mist. Others wander the town square or cross bridges, their forms fleeting yet unmistakable. Observers describe a sensation of being followed by unseen eyes, the quiet awareness that history itself is watching, waiting, and replaying fragments of long-forgotten routines and dramas. The combination of fog, architecture, and lingering energy creates an immersive environment where the line between the living and the dead feels blurred. Port Townsend's forests also play a role in its haunting. Trails and paths wind from the town into dense woods, where mist and shadows intermingle. Even well-trodden paths can feel unfamiliar, as the trees create a labyrinth of dark shapes and shifting forms. Visitors report seeing figures moving among the trees, sometimes sailors, sometimes women in Victorian garb, and other times indistinct shapes that appear almost human. Whispers rise from the forest floor, faint and unintelligible, yet carrying a sense of urgency or sorrow. Footsteps echo along paths where no one walks, and sudden chills pass through the air, as though the forest itself remembers the lives and stories of those who once traversed it. The combination of water, mist, and Victorian architecture gives Port Townsend a unique and haunting character. The town feels suspended in time, with echoes of the past permeating every corner. Ghostly figures linger on wharves and streets, shadows drift through fog, and the forests press close to the town, their presence both protective and oppressive. Visitors leave with the sense that they have stepped into a living memory, a place where history is not merely recorded in books or plaques, but plays out, continuously layer upon layer, in the very air and architecture of the town. Port Townsend endures as a place where history and haunting intertwine. The misty streets, shadowy sailors, wandering ladies, and dense forests ensure that the spirits of the past remain visible, if only fleetingly. Time seems to fold here, and the Victorian town continues to echo with the lives, ambitions, and tragedies of generations long gone. Even in modern life, the fog and architecture of Port Townsend carry whispers of the past, inviting visitors to witness the town as it wasn't, as it still is in the eyes of its lingering spirits. Northern State Mental Hospital, situated near Cedro Woolley, in the shadow of the North Cascades, stands as a chilling testament to both human suffering and the lingering presence of tragedy. Established in the early 20th century, the hospital served as a facility for the mentally ill, a place intended for care, but often marked by harsh treatment, overcrowding, and despair. Over decades, thousands of patients passed through its walls, many dying within its cold corridors. Today, the hospital has been abandoned for years, the brick and concrete buildings decaying amid encroaching forest. Locals speak in hushed tones of the more than 2,000 lives lost there, and visitors report strange phenomena. Disembodied voices echo through empty halls, shadowy figures linger near broken windows, and the surrounding woods themselves seem haunted, resonating with echoes of sorrow and unrest. Approaching Northern State Mental Hospital, one notices the unsettling stillness that permeates the air. The access road winds through thick evergreens, and as the forest presses closer, the decay of the hospital emerges through the trees. Cracked windows gape from the main building like empty eyes, graffiti stains the walls, and nature has begun reclaiming the grounds, with weeds sprouting through pavement cracks and vines climbing rusted fences. Even during the day, the atmosphere is oppressive, as if the weight of countless lives lingers in the very air. Those who enter the grounds often describe a strange feeling of being observed, the sense that the hospital remembers every scream, every whispered plea, and every step of the patients who once walked its halls. Inside the hospital, the haunting is pervasive. Empty corridors stretch into shadow, their linoleum floors warped and peeling, doors hanging ajar or fallen from rusted hinges. Many visitors report hearing footsteps echo where none should be, the shuffle of shoes across tile that has been untouched for decades. Whispers are perhaps the most common phenomena. Disembodied voices that speak indistinct words, a faint murmur of conversation, or a desperate cry echoing through corridors before vanishing into silence. Some hear calls for help or faint laughter, sharp and unexpected, as though the building itself plays host to memories of the lives it once contained. The halls feel alive with residual energy, a psychic imprint of countless moments of pain, fear, and fleeting joy that remain trapped within the structure. Shadowy apparitions are often glimpsed in hallways or through broken windows. Some appear vaguely human, drifting across rooms or disappearing behind walls, while others are more ambiguous shapes that shift and fade in peripheral vision. Visitors describe feeling sudden chills when these figures are nearby, as if the temperature itself is tied to the presence of the unseen. In certain rooms, the air seems thick and heavy, a coldness that penetrates the skin and raises goosebumps even in summer. Many explorers claim that even when alone, the sense of company is inescapable. The hospital feels inhabited by both the dead and the lingering echoes of those who survived. The forest surrounding Northern State Mental Hospital amplifies the sense of unease. Trails wind through dense trees and on overgrown paths near the hospital. Hikers report hearing footsteps, whispers, and soft cries among the brush. Shadowy figures are occasionally seen between trunks, moving with deliberate intent, vanishing when approached. The natural environment seems to carry the hospital's memories, extending the haunting beyond the decaying walls. Some say the spirits are restless, unable to leave the site of their suffering, their presence radiating outward into the surrounding wilderness. Even the wind seems to carry voices, rustling through leaves and branches in patterns that mimic human speech or the rhythm of hurried footsteps. Visitors who spend time exploring the grounds often describe sensations of time folding. A moment in the hospital can feel stretched or compressed. Minutes seem to pass like hours, or hours flash by in what feels like seconds. Objects sometimes appear to move slightly, a door ajar, or a piece of debris shifted, as though someone or something is watching and interacting with the world in subtle ways. Some explorers hear doors creak open or shut without wind, while shadows pass along walls that remain perfectly intact. These interactions, fleeting yet undeniable, leave a lasting impression of presence and memory embedded within the hospital. Northern State Mental Hospital is a place where history, tragedy, and haunting converge. The echoes of over 2,000 lives resonate in its corridors, the surrounding forests, and the air that hangs heavy over the grounds. Disembodied voices whisper, shadowy figures drift, and cold spots mark the unseen activity of lingering spirits. Visitors leave with an acute awareness of the weight of suffering and the lingering energy of those who once lived and died there. Though abandoned, Northern State Mental Hospital endures as a site of memory and spectral presence. The decaying buildings and overgrown grounds serve as a reminder of the fragility of life, the lasting imprint of trauma, and the possibility that some spirits remain tethered to the places where their stories ended. The haunting of Northern State is subtle yet persistent, a chilling blend of architecture, forest, and history that ensures the voices of the past continue to echo unseen but unmistakable to all who dare to enter its shadowed corridors and surrounding woods. St. Ignatius Hospital, perched on the outskirts of Colfax, Washington, is a relic of medical history and human suffering that has long since been abandoned. Once a bustling center of care, the hospital now stands in decay, its brick and concrete walls weathered by decades of neglect. Rusted gates swing in the wind, broken windows gape like hollow eyes, and the surrounding forest presses close, as if guarding secrets long left behind. Locals speak of moaning corridors, drifting shadows, and an oppressive energy that seems to linger, both within the hospital and in the dense woods surrounding it. Visitors who dare to enter the grounds often leave with the unsettling sense that the hospital is not merely abandoned, but alive with echoes of the past, replaying fragments of pain, sorrow, and unfinished business. Approaching St. Ignatius Hospital, one notices how the surrounding forest envelops the building. Towering pines and tangled underbrush press close to the edges of the cracked driveway, their shadows stretching across the hospital's crumbling exterior. The air feels thick, heavy with a cold that seems to emanate not just from the shade, but from the land itself. Even during the day, there is a subtle, almost imperceptible movement in the trees, as though unseen eyes watch every step. The hospital sits in silence, but that silence is deceptive, carrying the weight of decades of human suffering and whispered memories. Those who walk the perimeter often report a sensation of being followed, a prickling awareness that something unseen is observing their every move. Inside the hospital, the haunting is more pronounced. Hallways stretch endlessly, their tile floors warped, peeling, and cracked. Rusted bed frames and broken medical equipment lie abandoned in corners, serving as grim reminders of the lives once attended here. Moans and murmurs are reported frequently, faint at first, almost indistinguishable from the wind rattling through broken windows. But as visitors move deeper into the corridors, the sounds often grow louder and more distinct, echoing off walls and around empty rooms. Sometimes the moaning rises into a low, sorrowful wail, chilling those nearby to the bone. These sounds are intermittent and unpredictable, as if the building itself breathes with the pain of the patients it once held. Shadowy figures appear regularly, in both peripheral vision and direct observation. Visitors describe forms drifting silently along corridors, sometimes pausing near doorways or corners, and vanishing when approached. Some appear humanoid, moving with an uncanny, almost gliding motion, while others are less defined, flickering like smoke or mist. The presence of these apparitions often coincides with sudden drops in temperature, a cold that seems to seep into bones rather than just the skin. Many explorers report feeling a sense of pressure or weight in certain areas of the hospital, a sensation that something unseen is pressing close or attempting to communicate through movement and touch. The forest surrounding St. Ignatius Hospital adds another layer to the haunting. Trails and paths lead away from the main building, winding into dense underbrush where fog and shadow mingle. Hikers and late-night explorers often hear footsteps behind them on these trails, even when no one is present. The wind carries whispers and faint cries through the trees, and shapes are occasionally glimpsed moving between trunks and over moss-covered rocks. Some visitors describe a feeling of being enclosed, as if the forest itself is alive and aware, pushing inward to contain them within the haunted space. The combination of natural and architectural elements creates a sensation of immersion in a living memory, where both the hospital and its surroundings participate in the haunting. The rooms of St. Ignatius Hospital are particularly eerie. Patient wards, operating theaters, and administrative offices lie in ruin, but residual energy seems to cling to the walls. Some visitors report seeing objects move slightly on their own, an overturned chair, a door swinging closed, doors sensing unseen presences, brushing past them. Occasionally, mirrors reflect shadows or figures that are not present when the viewer turns to look. These experiences leave explorers with an unsettling impression that the hospital is replaying fragments of its past, not as static memory, but as a continuous, living echo. St. Ignatius Hospital's haunting is a blend of sound, shadow, and environment. Moaning corridors, drifting figures, and cold spots remind visitors of the immense human suffering that occurred within its walls. The forest presses in, amplifying the sense of isolation and unease, while the decay of the building itself acts as a physical record of time's passage and the lives once lived there. Those who venture inside or walk the surrounding grounds often report an acute awareness of the past lingering around them, an invisible weight that cannot be ignored. Even decades after its closure, St. Ignatius Hospital endures as a site where memory and spirit converge. The corridors, rooms, and surrounding woods are infused with the presence of those who suffered and perished there. Shadows drift, moans echo, and the forest seems to lean closer, ensuring that the history of the hospital is not forgotten. Visitors leave with a sense that the hospital is not truly empty, that it remains alive in a spectral sense, replaying the pain, fear, and sorrow of generations who once walked its halls, whispering their stories to all who dare to listen. In the remote reaches of eastern Washington, hidden among rolling hills and dense forests, lies a site that has fascinated and terrified locals for decades. Mel's Hole. Unlike any ordinary sinkhole, this pit is rumored to be bottomless, a dark, yawning abyss that seems to defy the natural order. Stories of its discovery date back to the early 1990s, when a man named Mel claimed to have stumbled upon the hole on his property. According to his accounts, no rope, chain, or cable ever reached the bottom, no matter how far it was lowered. Over the years, Mel's Hole has gained a reputation not only for its extraordinary depth, but also for the strange lights, mysterious disappearances, and inexplicable phenomena that seem to occur in the surrounding forest. The first thing that strikes anyone visiting the area is the eerie stillness. Even during the day, the forest surrounding the pit feels unusually quiet. Birds seem hesitant to sing, and the wind through the trees carries a hollow, unnatural sound. Visitors report an unsettling sensation of being watched, an invisible awareness that presses close without revealing its source. The ground near the hole is soft and uneven, and a subtle vibration can sometimes be felt, as if the earth itself hums with the unknown. Locals caution outsiders not to approach too closely, claiming that those who peer too deeply into the abyss risk something far beyond mere physical danger. At night, the phenomena intensify. Strange lights are often seen rising from the pit, dancing in patterns that defy explanation. Some describe them as flickering orbs, glowing a pale blue or green, while others speak of beams of light shooting vertically into the sky before vanishing abruptly. These lights are not consistent, appearing unpredictably, sometimes for hours, sometimes for only moments. Photographers and paranormal enthusiasts have tried to capture the phenomenon on film, but most report that cameras fail to record the lights clearly, leaving only vague blurs or empty darkness where the spectacle should have been. The effect contributes to a sense of unreality, as if the whole exists partially outside the natural laws that govern the world. Disappearances add another layer of mystery to Mel's Hole. Local legend tells of animals vanishing near the pit, pets lost while exploring the forest, and even people who wandered too close to its edge, never to be seen again. Some visitors report hearing faint cries or pleas echoing up from the depths, though the source is impossible to locate. Stories of these vanishings are widespread, and while few can be verified, they persist in local lore, reinforcing the pit's reputation as a place of danger and mystery. The surrounding forest seems to participate in the enigma. Trees near the hole often grow twisted and gnarled, their roots clinging to the earth as if resisting some invisible force. Shadows shift in unusual ways, lengthening and bending even when the sun is high. And unexplained cold spots appear along trails leading toward the pit. Many visitors describe a feeling of vertigo or disorientation when approaching the edge, a sense that the normal rules of perception are distorted. Whispers are occasionally reported, indistinct murmurs that seem carried on the wind but come from no visible source. The combination of darkness, forest, and bottomless void creates a sensory environment that is both captivating and terrifying. Some researchers and paranormal enthusiasts suggest that Mel's Hole may act as a conduit to another realm, a window into a dimension that exists parallel to our own. Others claim it is a naturally occurring anomaly, a geological oddity that interacts strangely with the environment. Regardless of explanation, those who approach the hole cannot deny its power to unsettle, the way it captures attention and refuses to release it. Observers often find themselves lingering at the edge, unable to turn away, feeling both drawn to and repelled by the void. Over the years, Mel's Hole has attracted curiosity seekers, scientists, and storytellers, each drawn by tales of the bottomless abyss and the forest that guards it. Those who spend time near the pit describe an acute awareness of the unknown, a sense that the earth itself remembers something ancient and secret. Even when the sun rises and the forest returns to daylight, the memory of the dark, yawning hole remains, leaving a lingering unease that is difficult to shake. Mel's Hole endures as one of Washington State's most enigmatic locations. Its sheer depth, unexplained lights, disappearances, and the oppressive energy of the surrounding forest ensure that the mystery is far from solved. Visitors leave with a sense of awe and trepidation, aware that the world contains places that defy understanding, where the boundary between the known and the unknown blurs. The pit remains a silent sentinel of the inexplicable, a bottomless void that continues to fascinate, terrify, and haunt all who come near, a place where reality itself seems to pause and listen. Along the rugged coast of Washington State, near the mouth of the Copalis River, lies a landscape that is both eerie and mesmerizing, the Copalis Ghost Forest. This ancient stand of skeletal trees, preserved for centuries by an enormous tsunami, rises from the marshes and tidal flats like the bones of a long-forgotten civilization, weathered and bleached by sun, wind, and salt water. The trunks jut from the earth in jagged, irregular patterns, some snapped and splintered, others standing tall and gaunt. The site is a place of striking natural beauty, yet it carries a palpable sense of unease, a quiet energy that leaves visitors unsettled and alert to every sound. Paddlers navigating the waterways and hikers exploring the surrounding mudflats and forest edges often report whispers carried on the wind, flickering lights among the trees, and a haunting sensation of being watched by unseen eyes. The skeletal trees stand like sentinels, their gnarled limbs reaching upward and outward as though frozen mid-motion, and the gaps between the trunks form shadowed corridors that seem to shift with the changing tide and light. Visitors quickly notice that the area feels alive in a way that defies explanation. The forest seems to react to their presence, sending shivers along the spine even when nothing appears to move. Those who paddle through the tidal channels report strange auditory phenomena. Faint whispers are often carried over the water, seeming to rise from the base of the submerged trunks. The voices are unintelligible, fragmented murmurs that hint at conversations long past, yet the tone carries unmistakable emotion, sorrow, warning, and sometimes urgency. Some paddlers claim to have seen lights flickering among the trees at dusk or after dark, small orbs that hover briefly before vanishing, or beams that seem to move in deliberate patterns along the skeletal trunks. Attempts to capture these phenomena on cameras or phones often fail. Lights blur or disappear entirely, leaving only the ghostly forest as evidence. On foot, hikers navigating the mudflats and forest edges experience a similar unease. Shadows flit between the pale trunks, often in peripheral vision, only to vanish when directly observed. The forest itself seems to shift subtly, with trunks appearing to lean or angles changing when no breeze blows. Travelers report cold spots along the marsh paths, sudden chills that have no apparent source, and a lingering feeling that they are not alone. Footsteps echo across mud and sand in places where no other humans are present, and the sound seems to follow them for long stretches, vanishing abruptly when they stop to investigate. The combination of visual and auditory disturbances creates a sensation of a living memory embedded in the landscape, as if the tsunami and centuries of natural history have trapped echoes of the past within the standing timbers. Local legend enhances the forest's enigmatic reputation. Stories tell of spirits tied to the ancient trees, survivors or victims of the cataclysmic tsunami that created the forest, wandering among the skeletal trunks in search of something lost. Some accounts describe figures glimpsed in the fog, human shapes that vanish when approached, leaving behind only a cold draft or an inexplicable rustle. Others speak of whispers that offer warnings to those who venture too far, voices that carry meaning only to those willing to listen carefully. These tales contribute to the forest's eerie allure, blending history, folklore, and the subtle presence of the natural world. The tide plays a central role in the haunting experience. Paddlers describe the reflections as almost lifelike, with trunks seeming to bend and sway independently of wind or current, and shapes moving beneath the water where none should exist. At low tide, the skeletal roots and stumps emerge from mudflats, forming jagged patterns that cast long shadows across the ground. Hikers often describe the eerie feeling that the forest itself is breathing, rising and falling with the tide, responding to unseen rhythms. The stark white and gray of the preserved trees, set against deep green marshes and reflective waters, creates a surreal, otherworldly landscape. The natural beauty cannot erase the sense of watchfulness, the feeling that every crack, every flicker of light, every rustle in the underbrush is observed by unseen guardians. Night amplifies these sensations, but even the sun-drenched forest carries its whispering secrets. The Coppolas Ghost Forest endures as a place of both natural wonder and spectral presence. Skeletal trees, preserved by an ancient tsunami, rise like sentinels from marsh and mud, carrying centuries of history and whispers. Flickering lights, ghostly shapes, and inexplicable sounds suggest that the forest remembers its own past, that it holds the echo of lives and moments swept away by catastrophe. Paddlers, hikers, and explorers leave the forest with a sense of awe and unease, aware that this is a place where the boundary between the living and the remembered is thin, where nature, history, and the unexplained merge to create a haunting, unforgettable landscape. Fort Worden, perched along the windswept shores near Port Townsend, Washington, is a relic of America's coastal defense system, built in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Once a bustling military installation, it now stands largely abandoned, its brick and concrete bunkers weathered by decades of rain, wind, and fog rolling off the Puget Sound. Visitors report that the fort is haunted in ways that are both vivid and unsettling. Ghostly soldiers march through fog-draped corridors. The sound of boots echoes across empty parade grounds, and spectral voices murmur orders, conversations, and cries that vanish into the mist. Even the surrounding forest seems to participate, with shadows shifting along tree lines, as if observing intruders. Approaching Fort Worden, the first impression is of a landscape suspended between past and present. Concrete bunkers rise from the cliffs, their doors rusted and windows shattered, while artillery emplacements jut out toward the water. The fog that often blankets the area thickens around the structures, softening their edges and lending an ethereal quality to the fort. Visitors note a strange stillness in the air, broken only by the distant rush of waves or the occasional caw of a crow. Yet beneath that calm is an undercurrent of tension, a sense that the fort remembers every soldier who once marched along its paths and every event that unfolded within its walls. Inside the bunkers, the haunting is immediate. The air is cool and damp, carrying the faint scent of rust and mildew. Footsteps echo in empty corridors, but careful observers quickly realize that no one else is present. The rhythm of these sounds often mimics the cadence of marching boots, a steady, purposeful beat that seems to circle the rooms before fading into silence. Some explorers report seeing shadowy figures in military garb moving along stairwells or disappearing through doorways, often accompanied by the metallic click of buttons or the faint jangle of equipment. The effect is disorienting, as if the bunkers are alive with memories, replaying the presence of soldiers long gone. Ghostly voices are another common occurrence. Murmurs float along hallways, indistinct at first, but gradually forming words or command snippets of orders. Casual conversations, and occasional cries of alarm or pain. Some visitors hear the voices clearly near abandoned offices or storage rooms, while others report them drifting from empty rooms or along the edges of the forest. These voices are intermittent, sometimes seeming close enough to touch, other times distant, carried on the fog that drifts through the open doors and broken windows. The combination of sound and shadow creates a palpable sense that Fort Worden is not merely abandoned, but inhabited in a spectral sense, with the fort itself acting as a vessel for memory and presence. Outside, the surrounding forests and cliffs add to the fort's eerie atmosphere. Trees and underbrush press close to the bunkers, and fog rolling in from the water frequently conceals and then reveals shapes moving through the mist. Visitors describe shadows among the trees that vanish when approached. The impression of figures standing at the edge of vision, watching silently. On the cliffs overlooking the sound, some report seeing soldiers appear in full uniform, only to fade like smoke when looked at directly. The forest and fort together form an environment where perception is unreliable, and every rustle, shadow, or murmur carries the potential for a spectral encounter. Exploring the grounds, one notices that the haunting is amplified in places of former activity. Barracks, mess halls, and parade grounds often seem to hold residual energy. Some report feeling sudden chills, the sensation of being followed, or the fleeting brush of an unseen presence. Visitors who linger in the bunkers after dark frequently describe seeing orbs of light moving through hallways, or noticing fleeting reflections in shattered windows that cannot be explained by passing cars or natural light. Even the sound of the surf can take on a haunting quality, blending with whispers and distant footsteps to create the impression that the fort itself breathes with history. Local lore reinforces the fort's spectral reputation. Stories tell of soldiers who never left, their spirits trapped by duty, tragedy, or unfinished business. Others speak of training exercises that ended in accidents or deaths, with the victims lingering as restless watchers. The fog that rolls in from the sound seems almost sentient, a carrier of voices and echoes, masking and revealing the spectral presence with every passing moment. Visitors often describe a sense of reverence mixed with fear, aware that they are walking among memories, given shape and sound by the architecture and landscape. Fort Worden's haunting is a combination of sound, shadow, and environment, blending military history with the inexplicable. ghostly soldiers, marching boots, spectral voices, and flickering figures in fog combine to create an immersive experience that both fascinates and unnerves. Even in daylight, the fort retains a palpable energy, a sense that the past is never truly gone. Night amplifies the haunting. As shadows lengthen, fog thickens, and the sounds of long-departed soldiers seem to echo across cliffs and courtyards. Today, Fort Worden stands as a place where history and the supernatural converge. The bunkers, parade grounds, and surrounding forest hold the memory of generations of soldiers and the presence of those who never left. Shadows drift, boots echo, voices murmur, and the fog carries the weight of the past, ensuring that the fort's story is never truly silent. Visitors leave with the sense that Fort Worden is alive in its own way, a sentinel of memory, history, and the lingering spirits of duty-bound soldiers who continue to patrol the misty grounds long after the living have departed. Deep within the dense wilderness of Olympic National Forest, tucked along the banks of the Hamahama River, sits a small, weathered cabin that has long captured the imagination and fear of locals and explorers alike. Known simply as Hamahama Cabin, this remote structure appears unremarkable at first glance. Aged logs, a moss-covered roof, and a stone chimney that has long since gone cold. Yet those who approach or spend time within its walls describe a place charged with an inexplicable presence. Doors swing open and closed on their own. Shadows flit across the walls without any discernible source, and faint whispers drift through the air, as though the forest itself is speaking. The cabin's isolation enhances its unsettling atmosphere. Surrounded by thick evergreens and tangled underbrush, the only access is a narrow trail that winds through steep terrain. The air is heavy with the scent of damp earth, moss, and decaying leaves, and the constant whisper of wind through the treetops becomes almost a language of its own. Visitors often report a sensation of being watched long before they reach the cabin, a prickling awareness that seems to come from every direction. Even during daylight, the forest presses close, casting shadows that move unnaturally and obscuring the landscape with sudden patches of darkness. Upon entering Hamahama Cabin, the sense of unease grows palpable. The interior is simple, with a single room dominated by a stone hearth, a wooden table, and a few chairs, all scarred by years of use and exposure. Yet the simplicity is deceptive. Doors creak and swing without wind, latches click as if unseen hands are testing them, and objects left on tables or shelves are sometimes found in new positions, rearranged in ways that defy explanation. Visitors describe the feeling of an invisible presence moving among them, brushing past shoulders or shifting just out of sight. Even the air itself seems charged, heavy and alive, as if it carries the residue of countless stories long forgotten. Shadows play a central role in the cabin's eerie reputation. During the day, sunlight filtering through the forest canopy casts irregular patterns on the log walls, but visitors consistently report forms that move independently of light. These shadows sometimes appear humanoid, shifting along corners and floorboards, or stretching across the ceiling in impossible angles. At night, the phenomenon intensifies. The cabin becomes a theater of shifting silhouettes, elongated and distorted, as though something beyond the physical world is watching, following, or replaying moments from a past that no living witness can fully perceive. The surrounding woods contribute to the haunting in subtle but unsettling ways. Whispers drift through the trees, carried by wind and echoing across the underbrush. Words are rarely clear, but the tone suggests warning, curiosity, or sorrow. Hikers and campers near the cabin often hear footsteps crunching leaves behind them, only to find no one there when they turn. Some report catching glimpses of figures darting between trees or pausing to observe from a distance. Even the river, flowing close to the cabin, seems to take on a strange quality, its gurgling waters occasionally punctuated by sounds that resemble voices or low murmurs. Hamahama Cabin also holds a reputation for sudden changes in temperature and unexplained energy. Cold drafts sweep through the interior, even when doors and windows are closed, and certain areas are consistently described as feeling heavy or oppressive. Explorers report sudden chills, goosebumps, and the sensation of invisible eyes upon them. Some believe these experiences are tied to the forest itself, the land around the cabin acting as a conduit for energies that have accumulated over decades of isolation and history. The convergence of the cabin, the river, and the surrounding wilderness seems to create a liminal space where the boundaries between the natural and supernatural blur. Locals offer their own stories and theories about the cabin. Some speak of early settlers whose lives ended abruptly in the forest, leaving behind echoes of fear and loss. Others recount tales of travelers who vanished near the cabin or returned with strange accounts of being followed by unseen watchers. Skeptics dismiss these stories as exaggeration or imagination, yet the consistent reports of doors moving, shadows flitting, and whispers in the wind suggest that Hamma Cabin is more than just an abandoned structure. The cabin and the forest seem to have a life of their own, preserving fragments of human experience, replaying them to those willing or, perhaps fated to witness them. Time in Hamma Cabin feels distorted. Visitors often report spending only a few hours inside, yet leaving with a sensation of having experienced much longer spans, as if moments stretch and compress unnaturally within the space. Light shifts oddly through the trees, sounds from the forest seem amplified or delayed, and shadows linger longer than their sources. The cumulative effect is a pervasive unease, the feeling that the cabin is aware of every movement and thought, silently recording and responding to the presence of those who dare enter. Today, Hamma Cabin stands as a mysterious testament to the isolation and wildness of Olympic National Forest. Its weathered logs, quiet hearth, and surrounding wilderness are more than just scenery. They are part of an enduring, unexplainable presence. Doors move, shadows flit, and whispers drift from the trees, ensuring that the cabin continues to captivate, unsettle, and haunt all who venture into its remote corners. Whether the source is the spirits of those who lived and died nearby, the forest itself, or something entirely unknown, Hamma Cabin remains a place where the natural and supernatural converge, leaving an unforgettable mark on every visitor who steps across its threshold. Nestled in the shadow of Washington State's Black Diamond Mountains lies a place where history and the supernatural collide. The Black Diamond Cemetery and the remnants of the town's old rail lines. Once a thriving coal mining community, Black Diamond now bears the quiet weight of abandonment. Overgrown tracks, crumbling buildings, and a small cemetery that has long been claimed by nature create an atmosphere steeped in both history and haunting. Locals and visitors alike report experiences that suggest the souls of those who lived and labored here have not entirely left. Ghostly lights flicker among the graves and along the rusted rails. Distant screams echo through the trees, and shadowy figures drift along the edges of the cemetery as if trapped between the living world and the one beyond. The first impression of the site is one of melancholy and decay. Overgrown brush snakes across the former town's streets and rail tracks, once the lifeblood of the coal industry, now vanish into the tall grass and moss. Weathered wooden ties and iron rails, twisted by time and the elements, hint at the relentless work and danger faced by miners decades ago. Near the tracks, the cemetery rises quietly among the trees, its headstones covered in lichen, their inscriptions faded by time. The air is heavy, carrying both the scent of damp earth and a lingering sense of sorrow. Even in daylight, the area exudes a weight that feels almost tangible, as if the collective memory of toil, tragedy, and death saturates the ground itself. Visitors report that the cemetery and rail remnants seem to pulse with life at night. Ghostly lights appear among the trees and tombstones, some resembling lanterns carried by unseen hands, others floating freely above the overgrown paths. The lights are unpredictable, appearing and vanishing without warning, moving in patterns that suggest intelligence or intention. Those brave enough to follow them often find nothing, yet feel an undeniable presence, a sensation of being observed. Along the abandoned rail lines, faint glimmers of light sometimes trace the path of trains that no longer run, as though the spirits of miners or passengers continue to traverse the tracks long after the town's decline. Auditory phenomena add to the cemetery's eerie reputation. Many visitors recount hearing distant screams or cries, sharp and sudden, carried on the wind from no identifiable source. Some describe these as echoes of accidents long past. Miners trapped underground or victims of industrial mishaps, their anguish lingering as spectral imprints. Footsteps are frequently reported along the old rail lines, the rhythm and cadence resembling work boots or the shuffle of laborers walking between shifts. Occasionally, the sound of rattling chains, clanging tools, or distant whistles pierces the quiet night, intensifying the sense of presence in a place abandoned by the living. Shadows play a central role in the haunting. Among the overgrown headstones, shapes sometimes appear at the edges of vision, human forms that vanish when observed directly, or larger, distorted silhouettes that seem to stretch unnaturally across the ground. Along the rail corridors, trees cast long, shifting shadows that can take on humanoid forms, giving the impression of figures moving in the underbrush. Hikers and ghost hunters report feeling unseen hands brush past them or a subtle pressure against the back as they move through the cemetery, reinforcing the notion that this is a place where the veil between worlds is thin. The landscape itself seems to respond to those who enter. Cold spots appear along the tracks and among the graves, sudden drops in temperature that chill to the bone. The air carries whispers that are difficult to interpret, sometimes fragments of words, other times just a mournful hum. Visitors describe an odd vertigo, a sense of time stretching and compressing, as though the cemetery and rail remnants exist partially outside conventional reality. The combination of sound, shadow, and atmosphere creates an immersive experience that leaves many with lingering unease long after leaving the site. Local lore amplifies the spectral reputation of Black Diamond Cemetery and the abandoned rail lines. Stories persist of miners who never left, bound to the place by duty, tragedy, or unresolved events. Some tales recount travelers or trespassers who vanished mysteriously, their presence absorbed into the forested ruins. Others speak of flickering lights guiding the lost, or warning the living to keep distance from certain areas. These accounts, passed down through generations, have become intertwined with historical facts, reinforcing the idea that the town's ghosts are not mere stories but enduring echoes of human lives entwined with the land. Even during the day, the cemetery and rail remnants hold a quiet power. Sunlight filtering through the forest canopy illuminates moss-covered headstones and twisted rails, highlighting the stark contrast between life and decay, presence and absence. Yet the whispers, fleeting shadows, and inexplicable chills are not confined to night. They linger, subtle but undeniable, suggesting that Black Diamond is a place where the past refuses to be forgotten. Today, the site stands as both a monument to history and a realm of the unexplained. The overgrown cemetery, skeletal rail lines, and forested surroundings preserve a sense of time suspended, where ghostly lights flicker, distant screams echo, and shadows drift endlessly. Visitors leave with a sense that they have walked among more than remnants of a cold town. They have glimpsed the restless souls who continue to inhabit the space, bound by memory, labor, and tragedy. Black Diamond Cemetery and its rail remnants remain a haunting testament to lives once lived, ensuring that the echoes of the past are never truly silent. And there you have it, -25 haunted forest villages of Washington, each with a story, each with echoes that refuse to fade. They are more than abandoned towns. They are memories frozen in time, inhabited by whispers of the past, and shadows that linger when the sun sets. If you ever walk these forests, listen carefully. The wind might carry a miner's cry, a logger's lament, or the soft footfall of someone long gone. And remember, in these forests, some never truly leave. Thank you for joining me on this journey into Washington's haunted forests. If these stories chilled your bones, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because the world is full of secrets, and there are more shadows waiting to be explored. Until next time, wanderers, stay curious, stay brave, and always listen to the forest.